Good morning and welcome to the September 19th public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Chu. Commissioner Ginsburg. Here. Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
Commissioner Master. Commissioner Holford Smith.
All right, thank you and welcome again to our the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting today, September 19th. This meeting is being held in person in our public hearing room at 1 Center Street. It can also be accessed through our Zoom, and the information for that can be found on our website. And if you're just interested in watching the proceedings, you may do so at our YouTube channel where it's being live streamed. And so with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through our agendas today.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Start today's Preservation Department agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 24-00213. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 640, lot 51, 338 West 12th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. An Italianate style row house designed by Jacob J. Bogert and built in 1859 to 60. The application is to alter the horse walk, reconstruct the rear facade and rooftop, modify openings at the rear facade, and construct a rear yard addition and rooftop bulkhead.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Ripple with Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners. We're the Landmarks consultants on this project. I also have with me here Randy Carell, architect from Robert A.M. Stern Architects, Karen Thomas, representing ownership from Karen Thomas Associates, and Deborah McGinnis from Summit Engineering. There we go. This is 338 West 12th Street. It is, as the director mentioned, an 1859 to 60 Italianate, originally 3-story plus attic brick building located on the south side of the street between Washington and Greenwich Village, between Washington and Greenwich and the Greenwich Village Historic District. It is part of a row of 3 that still exists today. Looking at the front of the building within that row of 3, 338 West 12th is in the middle between 336 and 340 West 12th Street. The proposed scope includes a good amount of staff level restoration work and updates, but the scope that we're reviewing today with you includes at grade alterations within the horse walk, including enclosing a portion of the volume and installing a paneled door set back from the historic gate above the cornice. Non-visible work, including setting back the existing altered 4th floor, construction of a stair bulkhead, installation of mechanical and railings, and extending the chimney. And at the rear, also not visible from the street, a small 1-story rear extension at the parlor level and alterations to the rear facade. Part of the proposal at the rear facade is also to reconstruct the upper brick to match the approval at 340 West 12th, which is on the left side in the rear elevation. And we'll take a closer look at that in just a minute. Please note that the rear at both 336 and 340 have been reconstructed. So this visual connection between the row has been lost. And overall changes at both the front and rear facades that are proposed as part of this project will improve the reading as a row, which has been lost over time. So kind of taking a step back to the 1940s, we see some of that change over time that's diminished that reading. At the primary facade, all 3 lost their stoops. You'll note at 338 in the middle that there was a secondary basement entrance inserted at the right side of the facade. There's a loss of historic windows at 338, which will be restored as part of this project. 338 was also painted or coated previously. And then at the neighboring buildings, there's also changes such as raised parapets and missing cornices. So taking a look at the block as well to note some of these changes, notably at the rear yard. It's believed that originally each of these had a rear building or stable accessed by a horse walk at the primary elevation. We're also seeing a historic 1-story rear extension at each. Let's see. Buildings are right here with the yellow dot. But as early as 1930, but shown in that 1955 map in the upper right, the rear building at 338 was removed. So the connection between the horse walk at that building and the rear building and the purpose of that passage was lost. And then there are very few changes actually between 1955 and the present. So here's that row of three as they exist today. You'll note that all three of them, after losing their stoops, were reconstructed just in the last 20 years. Cornices have been restored and replicated, although 336 retains that raised parapet and non-visible studio window above. And as seen in the 1940s photograph, 338 still has the non-historic 1/1 aluminum windows. Taking a closer look at the base of the existing buildings, 336 and 338 have a strong relationship between the stoops and the existing horsewalk gates, given their adjacency and similar details. They both have either historic cast or wrought iron gates and at-grade entrances. 338 has an especially dense, thick cast iron grid. 338 is on the right in the middle in the photo on the left, whereas 340 in the photo on the right is removed and has different details, all of which were previously approved by landmarks. Taking a closer look at the stoop, there's some at-grade work here at the stoop, including lowering the entry to the under-stoop entrance. This stoop was reconstructed in 2004, so some of the scope includes cleaning and restoration, as well as lowering that entry. So the resulting changes then are just two additional steps down below the stoop and a new gate, taller, but essentially matching exactly the gate that we see here. At the rear, taking a look at some of these existing conditions, again, 338 is in the middle, 336 is on the right, and 340 is on the left. 338 has replacement windows as well at the rear in a regular window pattern and brick discoloration, notably due to mechanical grinding. It seems that the rear was coated previously, and that coating was removed in a way that caused tremendous damage to the brick. You can tell just from looking at the color difference between 338 and 340 that you're seeing the inside of the brick. As noted, 336 and 340, the rear facades have been completely reconstructed previously per landmarks approvals. 336, of course, is a more modern design, a very different type of brick that was approved in 2004. 340 was approved in 2016. It also had that irregular window pattern, but was regularized under the LPC approval. And so the intent of this proposal, especially at the rear, is to match some of the approved details at 340 on the left, including the exact brick that was used, cast stone sills and lintels, and matching the parapet height so that all three will read at the same height at the rear. So the overall objective here is to more closely relate 338 and 340 and improve the reading as a row, at least between those two buildings. So some of these details show the kind of circular grinder marks that I noted previously, as well as other conditions that have been documented at the rear facade. You can see a high level of material deterioration and loss of the fire skin, that protective outer layer of the brick, leaving it vulnerable to moisture intrusion and further deterioration. In each of these, you can kind of see those circular grinding marks, and as well as step cracking, unit displacement, and structural cracking through the brick and sills. There's significant spalling and material loss throughout the facade. Some closer ups to really see the loss of that fire skin that you're seeing the inside of the brick. And a detailed view of some of the other conditions noted at the rear facade. At the center photo, 338 is visibly out of plumb with the recently reconstructed 340. So all in all, there are a lot of conditions that spell significant trouble for the rear facade. And part of the proposal, as mentioned, is to reconstruct the upper floors with the exact brick that was approved for 340 to physically knit these buildings back together and also critically provide 338 with a functional rear facade. Existing conditions at the existing or historic attic level or fourth floor, as well as the roof. In the lower right photo, you can actually see the shadow of that historic roof line sloping upward from the front parapet. So this scooping out and setting back of that attic floor was an alteration approved in 1999. It's clad with a very utilitarian corrugated metal cladding, nothing very special, and it's entirely non-visible from the street. The upper photos, skylights, mechanical vents, an existing chimney near the southwest corner. You can also catch views of the approved elements at 340 and the studio window at 336. So to take a look at the proposed scope in a little bit more detail, we noted that there's a lot of good restoration work that's going to be done, including masonry repairs and restoration of the brick and brownstone lintels and sills, repair and repainting as needed of all of the metal elements, including that historic cast iron horse walk gate, which will remain in place, installation of a new cast stone lintel and new wood windows to match the historic. Again, contributing to the reunification of the row houses at the primary facade. The main change, of course, is at the upper levels, alterations at that non-visible fourth floor. The western half will be further set back from the street elevation and clad in a gray finished wood paneling and a new door. And the eastern portion will remain in its current plane and will be glazed to bring daylight into the interior stairwell. At the roof, a new railing, mechanical and stair bulkhead, as mentioned, all substantially set back and non-visible. This is an elevation that cuts away underneath the stoop and behind that historic gate at the horse walk to show you the hidden scope. The historic gate at the horse walk will remain in place and set back 2.5 feet from the gate. A painted black door will be installed at the interior enclosure. The existing horse walk has been altered and has a 5'7" interior clearance at the rear and a 6'3" clearance at the street. So this very low head height and extremely narrow width has rendered the horse walk somewhat unusable, and also resulted in a very awkward interior condition with a partial raised platform inside the door and an offset interior stair. So given that the rear building was removed in the early 20th century, the horse walk does not connect back any longer to a rear building, and this original purpose for the passage was lost. However, as proposed, the retention of that heavy cast iron gate at the facade and retention of about 3 feet of the horse walk at the interior will preserve the reading of this element from the street. And if one were to look very closely through the gate, the visual of the interior door will maintain that sense of passage and the historic use of the space. Secondarily, under the stoop entry, we see new doors, and that under stoop entry area dropped by about 1.5 feet, adding 2 new steps. So in context with the row, the appearance of the horse walk will be maintained at the facade. Relationship between the passages at 336 and 338 is maintained. And given the proposed restoration work at the primary facade, the historic reading of the row will actually be quite improved. Some detail elevations just further showing those changes to the non-historic stoop compared to the existing conditions, and enlarged details showing the proposed elevations at the horse walk gate and within the horse walk. So changes to horse walks within the district is not a new conversation. And previously, the conversation has kind of centered around finding an appropriate and sensitive way to make the changes. So for reference, within this district, 83 Horatio Street was approved in 2017, where notably the area of the horse walk was incorporated into the interior at the basement level, and a new door with glass lights was installed at the exterior in order to maintain the reading of the horse walk at the primary facade and also maintain some visibility into the interior, which is, very similar in intent to the intent of this proposal at 338, excuse me. Also similarly, not pictured here, but recently reviewed by the commission, of course, was a proposal on Charles Street, notably an individual landmark within the district. And although it seemed no action was taken, there seemed to be a consensus on the revised proposal to retain a solid horse walk door at the primary facade and a portion of the horse walk at the interior, similar to what's being proposed here. And then just a couple of details of that non-visible work at the historic fourth floor and roof. At the rear facade, working from the ground up, the rear yard will be regraded to allow for at-grade entry at the basement level, similar to what has been approved previously at both of the neighboring buildings. At the basement facade, the new multi-light steel doors are installed at the historic plane of the building, and the horse block opening enclosed currently with a non-historic replacement door will be infilled. The parlor floor features a minimal 4-foot 10-inch extension with multi-light doors and windows and wood enframement and entablature. The second floor remains also at the historic plane with the new windows and doors. And then, as previously discussed, the third and fourth floors would be reconstructed at the historic plane with the same brick that was approved for the reconstruction of 340 West 12th, and new windows that also align and match 340 West 12th. The parapet would be extended to align with both of the neighboring buildings. And so, just to be clear, only the parlor floor is being extended. All the other levels remain in the historic plane. Overall, the design of the extension and new windows and doors are in keeping with typical extensions that we see throughout the district, and will more closely relate two of the buildings in this row to improve their relationship. And to see that just in an isometric, how that minimal extension bumps out and the rest of the facade remains in the historic plane. So taking a look at that within the context of the row, we see 338 and 340, which are the two on the left, reading in harmony, notably at the upper floors. And as a row, all three now consistent at the parapet height. Showing here in our long sections and plan, the existing cellar and how that will be excavated by about 3 feet and extended under the rear yard, but leaving 5'9" at the back for plantings. The backyard will also be lowered. It's important to note, we see here in this section across the three, that the neighboring lots have also undergone similar excavation, and the lengths of the lot were underpinned as part of that work. So consequently, new underpinning is extremely minimal in this proposal and limited to the 24 feet of width along the front lot line. And then a look at the proposed materials. The materials and finishes, as mentioned, are in keeping with the age and historic character of the building and the neighboring buildings. To reiterate, at the rear, the approved materials at 340 West 12th will be used for reconstruction of the rear facade, including the brick, mortar, cast stone, sills, and lintels. And to wrap up, this proposal really aims to accomplish a few things. To reestablish the lost relationship of 338 West 12th to the row in many ways at the front and the rear, and also to make some sensitive updates, including non-visible work at the roof, above the cornice line, the discrete intervention at the horse walk, and alterations at the rear here that allow it new life and longevity within the context of this district. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. The upper window with casements proposed in the rear?
Yes, that's right.
And is that the case for the building next door as well? That was,
Yes,
so they're both going to be casements. Okay.
right.
And the brick you're proposing to replace in the rear facade, is it going to be on top of the shaved brick or instead of the shaved?
No, it's instead of the shaved brick.
So the plane of the two buildable line.
Correct.
Great. And was there a mock-up study done? And
Yes.
Are there any shots of that?
We do. Let me just flip through the floor plans. So here's our mock-up. On the top left, you're seeing that new stair bulkhead, and in the top right, you're seeing the mechanical equipment and the extended chimney, and then of course the railing in the foreground. And then we took a look across the street and from down the block and from the other side of the block, given the heights of the surrounding buildings and the buildings on the other side of the block, none of this is visible.
Great, thanks.
Of course.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
I realize it has a low height. Currently, the horse walk runs from the front to back of the building.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Oh, well, one more, Commissioner Goldblum.
So you said that the height is really low.
Mhm.
How did they get horses through that?
It's a great question.
What was the point? No, it's not only a funny question. It's, was the floor raised? Is there any evidence of any modifications to the interior?
No, it seems that it was dropped from above. So there's a very low soffit that's been installed. Uncertain of the timing of that, but yeah, it's very low, notably at the back and at the front. It's
So like
still
the
also quite
presumptive floor was probably somewhere below that windowsill of that little window. Is that the idea?
at the interior.
Yeah.
So at the interior, let me just flip to.
I'm asking your conjecture as to where it probably was.
So at the interior, I don't think that the interior condition has changed. It's currently, as I mentioned, there's a very kind of awkward condition in the inside where there's this raised step in order to accommodate that horsewalk head.
That's the door of the horsewalk.
This is the interior door. On the left-hand side, what you're seeing here, this is the main entry to the house. This is that small window that aligns.
So this is the parlor. Okay.
This is the parlor level of the interior, right? So you end up with this raised condition at the interior and this offset stair, creating a very awkward circulation.
You're thinking that back when they actually did horses, that raised stair was raised further, and you could get a horse under there. Or, I'm just trying to figure out what changed.
There's a dropped soffit within the horsewalk. Yeah, very little has changed. It's really just a lower head height inside, but very little has changed.
And that soffit's right under that step.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks.
Exactly.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item? All right, not seeing. Oh, yes, please come up to the podium and state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Todd Cohen, and I'm the owner of 340 West 12th Street, the neighbor that just recently underwent an extensive renovation. I think it's a beautiful project, and I'm extremely excited to have an esteemed team designing this project. Where I see there being some issue, when I renovated my building at 340, I discovered that similar to the front facade, the rear facade was also built at the same time with the same intention of being coplanar with 336 and 338, to the fact that in typical buildings that I've seen, buildings will be built with 4 walls that connect in the corners, as opposed to a continuous wall at the front and a continuous wall at the rear. So when I renovated 340, I found that not only was 338 a continuous rear wall, that we had to actually extract our rear wall and rebuild a new one. So while I understand that they're going to restore the rear facade, which I think is beautiful, I do have an issue with the spirit in which they're extending their parlor floor, as opposed to keeping it coplanar with the building to, keep the spirit of the continuity, the carriage house in my property's rear yard. I'm sorry to hear that their carriage house was torn down at some point, because it is such a beautiful feature. But I think we really have to examine how these 3 buildings sit together. And in the landmark designation, they're all combined 336 to 340. And I think you really have to think about how these 3 buildings were built at the turn of the 19th century, and how, by extending the rear yard, you're really disrupting the original intention of how these 3 buildings expected to live together.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right, not seeing anyone else in the room, I'll turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups beforehand for this item. So first, we will be hearing from Chloe Gregoire from the Village Preservation. So Chloe Gregoire, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chloe Gregoire, and I'm speaking on behalf of Village President.
Chloe, we are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chloe. We can't hear you from. Can you make sure your desktop audio is on?
Yes, it should be. Sorry about this.
Okay. Okay, I apologize, Chloe. We may have to move on. I will call on you if you fix your issue with your computer. And next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from the BSNY. So Christina Conroy, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Okay. Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society.
I'm sorry, we are still having some difficulties on our end.
We're going to pause for just a second to correct an audio problem, everyone. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all so much for your patience. It seems as though these issues have been resolved. So Christina Conroy, if you could please state your name and state your testimony, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
All right, and you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Beautiful. Okay, so good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. Now, the Victorian Society finds this proposal to be modest and generally appropriate. We appreciate especially the restoration of the front windows to their historic figuration, operation, and material. At the rear, the alteration to the masonry opening at the 3rd level and the 2-story addition are modest and elegant. We have a few questions and suggestions. The front doors look as though they may be original to the first period of the house, though relocated first to the basement entrance, then back to the parlor entrance. If they are historic doors, we recommend refurbishing and refinishing rather than replacing them. The parlor floor windows need a heavier transom bar or muntin to match those on the adjacent houses, as well as those seen in the tax photo. Setting back the door inside the horse walk seems like a good plan to retain the sense that it's a through passage. However, the section on slide 23 appears to show a much shallower setback. The door should be recessed far enough that it's always in deep shadow. At the rear, most of the damage to the facade seems to be on the lower floors. We wonder if the upper floors of historic brick can be retained, possibly with application of consolidant, if the surface is overly porous. The out of plumb photo has the sun at such an extreme angle, making for an exaggerated shadow line. We suggest also that because the parapet height is being increased, a feature at the top, such as a corbelling or simple cornice, would improve its proportions. And finally, a better detail for the windowsills would have them extend into the masonry wall as they do at the adjacent house at number 340. Once again, we raise concern about the extensive excavation proposed. We note that the house is very close to the boundary of historic landfill. There is some comfort in the fact that the houses on either side appear to have cellars already excavated at the same level. Nonetheless, we hope the Commission will require robust engineering review and construction monitoring that exceeds, for example, that which was provided for 14 Gay Street and 1416 Fifth Avenue. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we will be hearing from Chloe Gregoire. So Chloe Gregoire, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chloe Gregoire, and I'm speaking on behalf of Village Preservation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Though the exterior gate at the entrance to the horsewalk is being retained, Village Preservation is disappointed to see this feature blocked in, as we note that horsewalks are an important historic feature that should be preserved in more than just a superficial facade appearance. The reconstruction and realignment of the upper floor masonry window openings at the rear facade is permissible, assuming a structural engineer's report has been provided to LPC proving it necessary. We do have some concerns about the proposed rear extension and its long projecting stair at the first floor, as there are no other rear yard additions present at this row. Similarly to the configurations of the neighboring rear walls on either side, we feel that masonry piers should remain between the 3 window bays at the second floor. Of most serious concern is the proposed excavation work at both the cellar and rear yard. We are extremely worried about the depth and extent of excavation proposed here and believe that it could not only undermine this house, but also its neighbors, particularly if the underpinning is not done very carefully and knowledgeably. We urge this to be reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Michelle Arbalou from Historic Districts Council. So Michelle Arbalou, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC supports this handsome and modest proposal in principle, with a few comments on the details. First, we find that the brickwork at the top of the rear facade should benefit from further detailing, something that creates a shadow line or reduces the brightness of its forehead. Second, we note that this building is built on landfill, so as other people have noted, this proposed excavation will be especially sensitive and require extraordinary care. LPC has pledged to improve its oversight of vulnerable buildings. We look forward to a rigorous level of oversight from both LPC and DOB on this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And I am looking through our attendees list now to see if any further hands are raised. And I do not see any hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends that the horsewalk door be approved and that it does not disturb the historic view from the public thoroughfare, that the areaway modifications be approved, that the alterations to the non-visible rooftop addition, the restoration of the rear facade upper floor, the additions on the basement, parlor, and second floor be approved, and that the excavation of the cellar and garden be denied until detailed plans and engineering studies are provided to the commission, which, in their view, ensure that the work does not endanger the integrity of the subject building, the adjoining buildings, and the adjoining gardens and rear garden structures. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you, Gregory. I'd like to turn back and ask if you'd like to respond to any of the comments.
Yes, thank you. All right, there are a couple things. So to just provide some additional clarification on the brick at the rear elevation, the mechanical grinding, as I noted, it seemed that the entire rear facade was previously coated and the entire rear facade has undergone that mechanical grinding. So the degradation of the brick and the loss of the fire skin does actually apply from the base to the top of the building where there was, original brick. And that concern and condition is, existing across the entire facade and not limited just to the base of the building. As far as excavation, we understand the concern, although we can confirm that, as noted previously, with the 2 buildings on either side having previously undergone excavation, the lot lines have already been underpinned along the entire width of the lot line, and the additional underpinning is very minimal as part of this scope and would be limited just to the 24 feet of frontage at the front of the building. Additionally, through confirmation through test pits it was clear that as part of the 336 excavation, they'd actually already dug into 338 a bit. So that ground had actually already been disturbed and kind of reconfigured. The intent at the primary facade with regard to the comment about doors and windows is to match the historic and the neighboring buildings. So those details will certainly be continually refined in order to do so. As far as the maintaining masonry piers between the windows at the rear facade, it's really, I think, there are multiple ways to kind of go about an addition at buildings of this age and style. And while 340 did maintain piers between the windows, the solution here with aligning openings at the basement through second floor and then the windows above also aligning is something that is seen throughout the district and has been found appropriate based on the proportions and scale. And significantly at these buildings, knitting these two buildings back together in order to improve the reading of the row, which has been completely lost over time, reestablishing punched windows, maintaining those punched windows at the upper floors and aligning them with 340 will really knit these two back together in a way that they currently are not. With regard to the horse walk, the horse walk will be maintained for approximately 3 feet, about 2.5 feet at the front of the building, and with the door set back from the gate, the reading from the sidewalk will be maintained. And importantly, it's the relationship between 340 and 338. To just go back to the primary elevations of the three. It's really that important reading between these two buildings that is maintained, that they both maintain their cast and wrought iron gates, and that sidewalk pedestrian experience and perspective remains as it currently is. At the rear facade, there's a note about additional detailing at the top of the parapet. The intent there, again, was to match 340 in order to kind of unify this row and adding additional detailing there might detract from that, but the team is certainly open to that. If that's something that the commission would like, we're happy to work with staff on that change.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, any final questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Yes, Commissioner Lutfi.
Do you know how old that gate is at the front?
It's original as far as we can tell.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, let's move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And we have 3 areas of work. We have some alterations to the existing rooftop addition and the addition of a bulkhead and mechanical equipment on its roof. And that is all not visible from a public way. At the back, the proposal is to reconstruct the rear facade and raise the height of it to align with the adjacent buildings and to adjust the fenestration pattern, maintaining punched openings at the upper 2 floors that will relate to 340, but shift slightly from the original condition. And then finally, at the horse walk, we have a proposal to incorporate it into the interior, but to set back to keep the front 3 feet of it. And, the commission has had a varied history on this topic. And as you may recall, we recently saw a proposal at 131 Charles Street where the commission has not yet voted, but there was a discussion about the horse walk, and some commissioners felt that it should stay in its entirety. Other commissioners were comfortable with keeping a certain number of feet at the front and the rear to maintain a door at both the front and the rear. And I would note, so it's similar, but I would note that that is also was an individual landmark, and it had the back building, which was Diane Arbus's studio. So that is the one thing that differentiated it. And the applicants have also presented a proposal at an approval at 83 Horatio Street, where the commission approved incorporating the horse walk into the interior and maintaining a door at the street level. So again, we've had a sort of a varied history and discussion on these topics. Oh, and finally, the last bit of work is excavation. They are keeping 5 feet of planted area at the back of the rear yard, which is consistent with our usual approvals. And they've described some of the underpinning that's already occurred, which limits the amount of more underpinning that has to be done. And as of course, with these kinds of projects, we will also be doing enhanced engineering on our end as well. So with that, we can begin the discussions. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure, but okay. I remember very clearly the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about the other project with the horse walk, and at that time, sense that I got was that horse walk as a three-dimensional artifact that was a part of a building was in and of itself considered a historic feature that merited preservation. At least that's how I understood the conversation at the time. And that intrigued me because I think that so much of our work seems to be relegated to the outermost veneer of the front of the building, and to a lesser extent other surfaces, and that kind of works against the reality that buildings are three-dimensional things. So I kind of, the differences between that application and this, I'm mindful of, and I hear what you're saying. So I guess I don't know how I don't have a strong conclusion on this. I do think that even if it is faced as an interior feature, three-dimensional feature, it should be retained in some degree from the back as well as from the front. I think that the fact that it appears on all 3 of these buildings in a row, and that 2 of those 3 buildings have rear yard structures, I think it's pretty remarkable. And since so much effort is being devoted to restoring a sense of the row, it seems like a bad trade to lose the rear expression of the horse walk. And I guess, part of me does feel like it should remain as a three-dimensional aspect of this volume of building. But I'm eager to hear what others say. I think that the rear facade is generally okay, except for the horse walk. I think the excavation is quite normal and well within the parameters of other stuff that we're doing on a regular basis.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I think in general, this is an elegant project. And as Commissioner Goldblum said, the one issue is the horse walk from my perspective. I agree with him on that. I think the front solution looks good. I understand that by getting rid of it inside the building, you make a much more usable plan. The stair can shift over. And I am torn about the rear facade in that I think this is a nice symmetrical facade that by keeping the horse walk and then trying to deal with the elevation of the horse walk at this. And so I'm interested what my other commissioners say, because I think in some way, I'm looking at the rear facade of the other buildings, and there seems to be in one of them some remnant of a horse walk and the other one none. And so I think trying to do something on the rear facade to recognize that the horse walk was there. I realized without the rear, what was a stable building, there's in a sense no reason for that. We're in another building where there was a rear building, which might be a separate unit. Having that access makes more sense. So I think I would in general approve this, but look at modifying the rear facade in some way to recognize that there was a horse walk there.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I share the sentiment with the two commissioners. We have a very history of this. We've voted in a number of different ways on this in the past. But I think that obviously, it would be a shame to lose the what we call the three-dimensionality of the horse walk. And so to the degree possible that whatever measure we can do to preserve some record of it. I do agree with Commissioner Goldblum and Commissioner Ginsburg as well in that the rear facade somehow, if it can be made, obviously destroy the symmetry, which is a shame. But this is being such a part of the history. So I like to hear what the rest of the commission have to say as well.
Commissioner Lutfi.
I'm in agreement with a lot of what everyone has said. So, but I'm going to repeat a little bit of it anyway. It is wonderful that there are these three buildings that are so connected historically and visually. And I commend the applicant for, the very thoughtful work that they've done to realign the planes at the back. And whatever work they've done on the front, which hasn't come before us. And while trying to make this home one that makes sense for the owner and modern living. So I'm actually going to start with the crosswalk, with the horse walk. I happen to agree with most of what I've been hearing here, that it is very, very important. These horse walks are really special. And we're so fortunate that there are still remnants of them in some of these buildings, and that there are, and I think I appreciate the fact that the applicant is trying to, preserve that. That front gate is like quite extraordinary. And it's great that it's, we would require it anyway, being preserved. But I had another thought that I would think, or an addition that I think would be great for the front and the back, because I do think that there should be an indication at the back, despite the fact that it's going to disrupt this beautiful symmetry. I do think there should be some indication, some door, something that there was a horse walk here. I would like to say that I don't know who mentioned this in the beginning, but there was some discussion of maybe in the prior project we saw a way of letting light in to kind of on the inside just speak to the fact almost, not only visually, but almost like spiritually that there was a horse walk here. So I would like to say, even though it's on the inside, maybe this is not within our purview, that I think that front door would be great if it was a glass door, so that whatever light can come in can sort of radiate a little bit of the feeling of the horse walk. And that in the back, that there's also that opportunity to visually project in light, so that even though we don't have the physical presence, certainly would be a nice conversation piece as well. And I appreciate what the owner, I appreciate the comments of the owner from the building next door at 340. But I have to say that overall, this building is now, based on all the work in the rear facade, going to be very well aligned with the building next to it. Thanks to the brickwork and the alignment of the windows at the top. You'll figure out the bottom because you have a very good architect doing this project. But I think the projection on the first two floors is very, very modest. And I don't really think it's going to be that visually disruptive. So I think that works okay. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master?
Yes, I also want to commend the applicant. It's clear that they put in a lot of work, and that the new renovations are really going to tie this house together with the other row houses. And it's going to be a big improvement. In terms of the rooftop additions and the bulkhead, they're not visible. I think I can approve it and find it appropriate. The rear facade additions, the replacement of the brick and the fenestration, I think are appropriate. And then the horse walk. So I was okay with the horse walk as presented, but Michael makes such a compelling point, and listening to the other commissioners, they've convinced me that if you could do something in the rear to, I guess, recall the horse walk, it might be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes, a well-designed and thoughtful, really thoughtful project, thought-through project. The use of the decorative elements on the rear facade is well done and adds character to that facade. In terms of the horse walk is an element in the building and should be maintained in section, plan, and elevation. It's almost like a basic element of these buildings and should be kept. One of the nice things about the back facade is the alignment of the parapets of the three buildings. I thought that was a nice touch to kind of combine them in a way with simple elements. The cornice, just really well done. Where am I? Modifying the openings in the rear facade, appropriate. Construction of rear yard addition is appropriate. Construction of stair pocket, also appropriate. And a hall, the only issue I have is the dog horse.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Okay, so I think that the reconstruction of the rear facade is appropriate and useful, obviously to the future health of the building. I think that the rooftop, including the bulkhead, is appropriate, that the fenestration in the back in general is appropriate. With regard to the horse walk, I think that first, I don't know that and I appreciate the idea behind Jeannie's suggestion of a window, but an opening, but I think that would be kind of unusual. Horse rocks, I think, were usually just a wooden door or something, so it might kind of make it look like something it wasn't. It might be the issue. So, while I'm very much in favor of retention of horse walks, I think that in general, what's important is that people see it in the public way and have the perception that it was there. And in the back, they're generally not going to see it. But I do think that the idea of a memorialization of the horse walk in the back is certainly appropriate and could easily be done. And I could support that, which a couple of the other commissioners suggested. I do feel because there's no back building and because, they are recognizing it in the front and then potentially in the back if and that we don't have interior jurisdiction, and we often see buildings totally changed within. I don't feel it's necessary in this particular case to retain the horse walk. I can see in other situations where you've got a real, you're walking through and going to a back building that it may really, as we saw in another situation, seem appropriate to try to maintain more of the actual structure within of the horse walk. But I don't feel it's necessary in this case. So that's where I'm at. And as far as the excavation, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Okay, so I think we have a lot of support for this project, but there is the issue of how to recognize the horse walk. And I think the majority. Yeah.
I just wanted to also note that on the rear facade, the rear addition is actually at the parlor level and it's recessed at the lower. So it's in plane with the floors above. So there actually is room to integrate something that recalls or memorializes a door sort of behind the pier that you see there. And I think the applicants have indicated they're willing to do that and work with staff on it.
Okay. All right. That's very helpful. Thank you, Corey, because I think if it involved reconsidering that rear yard addition bulk, then we'd want to see it again. But if it's actually something that can, because the lower floor is not pushed out, something that can be incorporated easily, I think we can do that and allow the staff to work with them on that. Okay, great. So we'll make a motion to approve it with the modification that they incorporate a door to recall the and a gate to, or gate to recall the presence of the horse walk in the rear facade design. Are you comfortable with that, Commissioner Goldblum? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one last thing. Just go back to the back facade, or the front facade with the shot. And what's real? Several people spoke about symmetry, and then we think of this. That this building, what's really remarkable about the row is that it's not symmetrical, and that it is the horse walk that's throwing the whole thing off. So, and all three of the buildings share that, and so it's the asymmetry of this kind of extraneous element that's pushed in that makes the row special. So regarding the West 12th Street, Frenchville started with the applications to alter the horse walk, reconstruct the facade and rooftop, modify or fix the rear, and instruct a rear yard addition and rooftop bulkhead. I know that the building's style, scale, and detail from features which contribute to special architectural and historic character of Frenchville Historic District. Oops. What? Can't hear it, just instead. Well, I was thinking. Use this one instead.
Sorry. Okay. So shall I start? Just keep on going.
You can keep going, but just actually move back a little.
Okay.
Too close and.
Echoey. Okay. Sorry. How's that? Okay. All right. I know that. Okay. So I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the existing condition of the brick at the rear facade is severely deteriorated and therefore the reconstruction of the wall is warranted. The top two floors of the rear facade will be reconstructed in the plane of the original wall with matching fenestration, lintels, and corbelled brickwork, thereby preserving the relationship between this and the other buildings in the row. That the proposed work on the rear facade and rooftop will not be visible from any public thoroughfare.
that the simple form, fenestration, materiality, and neutral finishes of the rooftop addition will be in keeping with other rooftop additions within the historic district. That the combined opening at the second floor of the rear facade will align with the existing punched openings at the floors above, resulting in a cohesive fenestration pattern that maintains the residential character of the row house. That the proposed two-story rear yard addition is modest in scale and will not overwhelm the central green space, and that other two-story rear yard additions exist within the block. That the materials and design of the rear yard addition, consisting of red brick cladding, decorative wood features, and multi-light metal window and door assemblies and metal railings, will recall the typical materials palette and level of articulation found at rear additions and facades throughout this historic district. That the rear yard excavation will be pulled back at least 5 feet from the rear lot line to allow for substantial plantings at grade. That the excavation of the cellar and rear yard will be done in compliance with DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the facades of the building and adjacent buildings. And that the applicant will work with the staff to integrate a door or opening that reflects the former presence of a through building horse walk on the rear facade.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved with that change. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 23-04336. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 651, lot 61, 32 Jane Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a row house built in 1826 and altered in the late 19th century. The application is to apply coating systems at the front and side facades, modify openings at the entrance and rear facade, replace infill, and construct a rooftop bulkhead and chimney.
Morning, my name is Mike Schmidt. I'm the architect for the project at 32 Jane Street. And I'm here to present the renovations we're proposing. Specifically, what we're proposing that affects the exterior are an addition to the a stair bulkhead addition to the rooftop, just for rooftop access, a realignment or raising of the front door, which is below sidewalk level now, infilling a side light well that was added later before it wasn't original to the original project, and rearrangement of windows on the rear facade due to a realignment of the floors on the interior. So the first slide is just a contextual slide. On the lower left is the Sanborn map, early Sanborn map, which shows the original structure, which we believe was constructed in about 1839. It's 21 feet wide by 30 feet deep. It's a three floor plus basement townhouse. And then it has a very strange history of this building. In the late 1880s, a brick addition was done in the rear, approximately 16 feet deep by the same width, and an internal reorganization of the space. And the addition, what's very strange about it is 4 stories plus basement. So they slipped in an extra floor, which left ceiling heights of like 6'8", under 7 feet in the rear. So I don't know how that ever got approved, but it did. The photos on the upper left is the tax map photo, and the view of the street looking west. Our building is 32 Jane, which is the darker gray building towards the end, and then the view of the east facade. The next slide. So this is just to give context of the interior, so that you understand what we're proposing on the exterior. On the lower left is the existing section, the front portion of the building. This is the combined, original structure plus the 16-foot addition. Shows the 3 floors plus basement, which are typical floor to floors. And then on the right side of that same section is how they slipped in this 5th floor, particularly at the very top, where it's almost like a little room. It's 6 feet 8 inches tall, and the existing townhouse roof slopes up to a higher addition in the back. What we're proposing is to realign the floors on the interior, which you see in the section on the right, to be 3 floors plus basement, which would have been the original, which is the original structure of the original townhouse. And then above, the reason these cards are here, these are the I cards, and the I card on the left is, I think, about 1914. It shows it documents the floor plans on the interior, and there is no light well in that original edition. And then on the right, it's about 1934, and it again was renovated, and then a light well was put in. It's our intention to just close that light well back off and keep that as interior space. The next slide, we did a mock-up on the roof. The bulkhead being proposed on the roof is strictly a stair bulkhead to get to the roof. It's angled as it follows the rise and run of the steps. Has a flat roof over the landing portion. The interior height is 7 feet 2, which is just enough height to get a door, a sill, and a trim above the door to get to the outside onto the roof. The middle picture shows that it can't be seen from the street, and the right picture shows only a small portion of it at the upper right can be seen, and what's really seen are railings that we're proposing. And as part of this project, we're also putting in mechanical units, but they're set in the lower roof in the center so that they can't be seen from the street. And on the lower left, the slides on the left are renderings that we did. So the slide on the extreme left is looking west. You see the east facade. The existing east facade has deteriorated painted siding, metal siding, which we are removing and replacing with a traditional 3-coat with galvanized lath stucco system, and the color would match the existing gray that's on the other side of the building. It also shows there's an existing kitchen exhaust vent that goes straight up from the neighboring building, and we're proposing to offset that towards the back and then up 3 feet above the bulkhead. The bulkhead that you see in the rendering, we've set the bulkhead back the thickness of the parapet wall so that the line of the roof angling from the front to the back is maintained. And yeah, that's the east facade. And then the front facade, so on the lower left, you see the new door. And specifically, you're going to hear testimony from Community Board 2 we presented to in April, where we actually, there's a non-original steel window above that entrance door, which we first proposed to be removed and extend the opening, the masonry opening, to include a very large transom window. And based on Community Board 2's suggestions, they felt it was totally out of character with the building and the scale. And in retrospect, I agree. We went back and we looked at it and we studied doors along the street and felt like just raising the door the 19 inches to get to the sidewalk level was the best way to deal with that situation. And I'll get to that on the next slide. But then on the right, you see our rendering that shows the railings and a little bit of the top of the bulkhead. So this slide is just to give a kind of documentation of the doors on the street, as well as we went to the McDougal Historic District and looked how they did openings in painted facades from the, their facades are painted from the sidewalk level or lower level up to the cornice. And you'll notice on the left, the gray building in McDougal Street, they have the same band, they paint everything out the same color, and then the opening extends above the band. So, and then on our street, specifically, the slides on the lower left, I think it's 22 and even next door 30, the doors on several of the buildings are very, very simple masonry cuts. The doors set back, 10 inches, 12 inches with a simple frame around it. And that's what we're proposing on the right is our proposal, which is very similar to the simplicity of the other two slides. This is the architectural drawings for the proposed front renovation, and also photographs of the front and probes that we did in our investigations of how to deal with the front facade. So first I'll go through the architectural drawings. On the left, we're removing the fire escapes. We're raising the door. As you can see, it's the exact same size door. It's about 7 feet by 32 inches. We're raising it 19 inches so that the sill is level or just 1 inch above the sidewalk to keep water. There's problems with water flowing in the door. There's problems with trash. And it's also very difficult to access the building. This is why we're proposing this. The building, the drawing on the right shows how that masonry opening works with the facade. We're replacing the existing windows, the wood windows 6/6 with compatible historic wood windows. We're restoring the steel window that's above the door. We like the quirkiness of that one steel window. Again, suggestions from Community Board 2 that it's a kind of idea that you see around the village. Again, we agree. And then on the right, the probes we did. Initially, we wondered like how deep the stucco was on the front of the building, and we did probes, and it turns out it's 1 inch thick stucco, and behind that stucco it's extremely deteriorated brick. And we cut through the banding, and there you can see also the brownstone is also deteriorated. So the idea to try to restore the masonry really doesn't exist. You would have to replace it, and we felt it better to keep the existing stucco, keep it as a painted facade, and repair it. So our proposal is to, you can kind of see in that middle large slide, there's a lot of waterproofing paint that's been gooped on that facade over the years. There's some stress cracking coming through in the stucco. So our proposal is to strip as best as possible after the fire escape's removed, the finishes on the facade, to get it down as close as we can to the stucco, to do sound testing, chip out any hollow areas, repair those with the 3-coat stucco material, repair any cracks, and then coat it with, instead of just using normal paint, because we don't feel it'll bond properly to the various substrates that we might come across, including the waterproofing. And we also don't want to trap water. There's a product called Elastigirl 5351, which is a acrylic water-based breathable, it's basically a heavy paint that goes on, and it can be pigmented to match the color, which we're proposing the same color. It's white window sills, white cornice, the cornice is painted anyways, and then the facade, the dark gray. So next. The next slide are the side elevations, the east elevation and the west elevation. The east elevation on the left. The brick in the rear is from the 1880s extension, or we're just proposing to repoint and clean the brick. The existing metal, as I mentioned before, we're going to remove and add do a 3-coat stucco system with the tinted final coat to match the light gray that's typical of the side walls. And on the west side, which is the right side, it's similar to the front facade. It's got years and years of waterproofing and stuff on it. We're going to strip as much of that as we can off, repair the stucco where we find damaged and cracks damaged, and then recoat it with the Elastigirl 351 with a light gray color instead of a dark gray color. And at the top on the right, you see the railings on the roof, the upper roof, which we're not changing the level of the rear roof, and the bulkhead in the distance. The rear facade, so I mentioned at the beginning, there's a realignment of floors. So what's happening in the rear facade is basically the freestanding building. There's no structures on the west side, or 1-story structures. There's only a 2-story structure on the east side, and in the rear, there's a rear yard setback, and you're looking at the side or rears of buildings, and then you actually can see the top of 12th Street in the distance. Those are the photos that you see. And on the left, the rear facade as it exists now and drawn, we're removing, again, the fire escape. We're removing this, you see in the lower right corner, this double deteriorated metal flashing, way too big for what it needs to do, and replacing that on the roof at the same with a single layer flashing. And then what we want to do with the windows is on the 2 lower levels, one kind of simple where the cellar level or the basement level and first floor are combined as a larger opening that gives a better connection to the rear yard, and above the punch windows. And the dilemma, as I said, was we have an 11-foot ceiling height on the interior. I can go to the next slide and then come back. You can see it on the upper left. There's an 11-foot ceiling height. That's the existing roof when we straightened out the floors. So we worked with proportions on the windows, and it's only 8-foot ceiling height below, to do 6/6 and to try to raise the sill of the upper window, upper floor, and slightly make it taller so it works proportionally in the space. And if I go back, so you have 6/6 both upper and middle punched openings. And our goal is to reuse the masonry where we adjust. These windows are only being adjusted vertically, not left to right. They're not being made wider. And our goal is to reuse the masonry to do the infill, so it's stitched back in. And if we can't or don't have enough masonry, we'll look for masonry that will match. So the rear facade is like the two side facades. It's a masonry facade that's got a natural finish to it. Section that we just went through. And then here's a section through the stair bulkhead, just to show how we've minimized the volume projection above the roof as much as possible. A small curve on the roof on the lower level, the angle of the roof with the skylight, very traditional, follows the stair, and then a flat roof, 7 feet 2 inches ceiling height at the top. You come out at the lower roof level and go up a couple steps to the rear roof. Slides on the left, looking south and north of the existing roof plan with this light well that was cut in at some point. The plan in the middle is the same roof plan with the light well filled in and the bulkhead added. You can see how the mechanical equipment is located with the railings set in so that they're not that visible from the street. And then the right slide is just an aerial view of the top of the bulkhead. And I'll leave with this slide, which is the same images but larger that I presented earlier, showing the building looking west on Jane Street, showing the new stucco on the east facade, the offset flue, the stair bulkhead set back from the parapet wall, and the repainted front facade. And then the front view showing the door, which is really humbly raised 19 inches in the same opening. And then the windows restored, replaced, and the one steel window restored. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg.
Yeah, you're painting the door in the front, the green. What was the reasoning for that?
Well, that's a really good question. It's totally arbitrary, but it's not arbitrary. I mean, there's a lot of life to doors, and when you walk around the village, and there's different colors. And we looked at studies: blue, black, white, and we just felt like down the street there's a building that's like balconies are all this kind of light blue color and whatnot, and we just felt like the green really stood out with the gray in a nice way, but not too garish. But that's why we just felt like it added something to the facade to have a color rather than just a black door, because it is set back and it is on the sidewalk.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
In the section, south section, and I can understand functionally why you did the entry. You had the slab come across flat.
I'm sorry.
Is there any other solution that you've seen in the village that would accept stepping down, that instead of having to have a 7-foot door, is there an alternate solution with that spot?
Is there any? I'm sorry, I misunderstand the question.
It works here, it's platform coming in, and I understand the problem.
Right. And trash and access, yes.
But this one, you have to add a 7-foot door, minimum size.
Right.
And whether there was any other alternative, but I can't come up with one. I'm just asking.
Well, that's what I was saying initially. We work backwards for something that is more grand in our design, and if I can flip through the appendix, but it really doesn't matter. For the community board too, we need to raise the door. It was probably one of the I-cards showed what was possibly a stoop on the front. So this was obviously something that was low and behind these steps. The street is really narrow. We have no documentation on the stoop. It isn't a plan to put that back. But it is necessary to raise the door to at least sidewalk level. And so we're doing that with a 3/4 inch saddle so that any water running on the sidewalk doesn't go in. There's no trash that builds up, and you can actually open your door and walk in. So that's why we're doing it. And we looked at a scheme where we made a big transom above the door in the same masonry opening, and it was just too monumental for the facade. So in looking back at the other examples, and if I go back to the slides, these slides, when looking at the other examples, it seemed most appropriate to keep it simple. And really, like no framing around the masonry opening, just a cut in the masonry opening, the door set back, the thickness of the wall. And, it's really a humble solution for the door to solving the problem of the door. And we felt that was the best solution.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Master.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the elastomeric waterproofing coating and tell me a little bit about what else you had considered with alternatives?
Well, the question is what could be the alternatives? As we're doing on the east facade, where we're taking all of the material off and redoing it, we could do a traditional 3-coat stucco finish with a tinted top coat. That would be the desired process. However, we don't have that option on the front facades because the stucco is there. It's in relatively sound condition. It's 1 inch thick. And if we start chipping that off, it's very possible all the backup brick could be compromised. So we're dealt with what's there. And what's there is stucco that over the years has been coated and coated and coated with waterproofing, with paint. It's sloppy. And there was a suggestion, can you just put a veneer of stucco on top of that? It's tinted. No, it won't bond. There is the possibility if we can strip the paint totally, if we can strip the waterproofing and really get to a true stucco finish, then we could use a traditional exterior paint. But the Alaska Wall 351 is designed for this application, and that it looks like paint when it's done. It comes in different sheets, and it has a better bonding to whatever's behind it. So the substrate, which we can't guarantee is perfect cement stucco, and most likely it won't be, it will bond to that. And the advantage of using that product is it breathes. So we're not trapping water within cement and therefore causing rot. It breathes, and it's water-based, it's environmentally friendly, and it can be pigmented to look like paint. That's why we chose that product.
Right. Any other questions? So just to follow up on the door, I know you're raising the height of the door 19 inches.
Yes.
How much do you have to move up from I know you're raising the sill as well. Is that?
It's 19 inches.
It's 19 inches at the bottom. So the whole thing goes up. Okay.
And the existing door is nearly 7 feet and we're using the same height. There was a request, could we make it align with the top band, but it's too low. And not only is it too low, if you think about this band that projects out, if it suddenly hits a recess in the facade at the same level, it's kind of going in and out. Whereas if it slightly goes above, and we see that on the Google Street, it's a nicer detail because the masonry opening is a simple masonry opening in the wall, and the band is a band. It's got a cut in it, probably a chamfer to keep it from hitting you when you walk in. So we didn't go 8 feet. We kept it the same. We just
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. If there are no other questions, we'll move to public testimony. And I'll first see if there's anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item. All right, noting that no one in the room wishes to speak on it, I will turn this over to Gregory Kala to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, and we will be hearing from Chloe Gregoire from the Village Preservation. So Chloe Gregoire, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning again, Commissioners. My name is Chloe Gregoire, and I am speaking on behalf of Village Preservation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. The proposed raised front door stands out against the primary facade due to its color, lack of door surround detail, and cut into the masonry band above, We hope that the applicants will consider refining some of these aspects of the design. An easy fix could be to paint the door a more neutral color. Breathable coatings or paint should be applied to these stucco-clad masonry facades, rather than the Elasto waterproof coating as currently proposed. We also have some concerns about the extensive use of glass at the rear facade and resulting loss of historic fabric, and want to ensure that the extent of interior structural modifications paired with the changes to the masonry opens at the rear does not cause structural damage to the building. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the restoration of the front facade and the replacement of the double hung window, and denial of the tall window above the entrance, which has no historic reference and introduces an unwelcome and out of scale modern element to the facade, and that the masonry band above the ground floor be less prominent, and approval of the rooftop additions and rear facade. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard. I know that many of the community board comments you've already addressed, but.
So the community board is exactly what I mentioned. We did have a much more grandiose scheme. We did take their suggestions and we reduced it or, simplified it. And in response to the call in, we also looked at doing a stucco band like trim on the masonry, defining the masonry opening. We worked with the staff on this, and we concluded that that was not correct either. That it's really, you need to be honest about this, and the honesty and what keeps it from being something that really stands out is that it's a simple masonry opening with a setback door and trim, and that's why we propose it. And in terms of the Alaska Wall 351, as I mentioned, if we completely, strip this building and we could get it to actual stucco, it's possible we might be able to use an exterior paint, but we feel this product is a good product. It's used on other historic structures in the city, and it will hold up and last. It's quite expensive too. It's not a cheap proposition.
And you noted that it was breathable.
It is breathable. Yeah, we would not want to seal any more.
Okay. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so there's the work at the front facade, which includes recoating the already coated facade. The applicant described the underlying conditions and the complications there. They're proposing a breathable coating. The proposal also includes raising the door height so that you can enter on grade, and then coating the side facades, constructing the rooftop bulkhead and mechanical equipment, and then aligning the floor levels on the interior, which results in a different design at the rear facade. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Yes, thank you. So in general, this looks nice, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and thinking about this. And I just have a few comments or thoughts. I like the green door. This may be radical, and we'll have to see what the other commissioners say. I also understand why you're raising it, and although it isn't ideal, I think it's a reasonable solution. I think you should work with staff once everything's been stripped to see if you can put a breathable masonry paint, or if you need to go to the elastomeric coating, but the key issue is it's breathable, and you've thought about that. I want to raise a concern, which is reuse of bricks is not recommended by the Brick Institute of America, because the mortar, when a wall is built, the mortar seeps into the capillaries of the brick for a better bond. So I would be careful on that. I realize it may be impossible to find a match. So work with that, but that would be something just to work with staff. But if it becomes hard to reuse the brick, I would just try to find a match. But I think this is approvable
Okay,
from
thank
my
you.
perspective.
Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, this one is interesting. I think, the door really stood out, I guess, in this case. And I think the choice of color. But I was looking at the applicant, by the way, I commend the applicant for the thoughtful, research and the comparison. To me, we just, in looking at the other historic example in the neighborhood, there's something about, and I guess that's why, the comment from the community board and the comments from the staff. And I'm not sure where we're headed into this one. One way is obviously accept the green, which is the way it is. But I'm just still pondering what is the optimal solution for this one is. As Commissioner Ginsburg said correctly, the application of that material, as long as you're absolutely sure that it's breathable, then I can accept it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I am in agreement about the fact that you have clearly put a lot of thought into this and have examined a lot of options. Some of them people have questions about, but in general, I agree with both Commissioner Ginsburg and Jen. I also like the green door. I think the only thing that it does do is it calls more attention to the misalignment, with the door being higher. So if you want to think about that a little more, fine. Otherwise, I'm okay with it. And I think I'm okay with just based on everything discussed with the elastomeric coating, because it is breathable. And if you don't have to go all the way down to to the exposed brick, and this will work not only in terms of being a good product, but also from a visual standpoint, I can go with that.
Okay, thank you. And I think it is worth noting the applicant pointed out that in the village where you have painted facades, you have doors that are also painted different colors. And I think we've historically been a little flexible on colors. It's the one place that owners can actually kind of reflect their individuality on their building. But I think it's a facade that's painted. And so now there's multiple colors to think about. And so I think that's one way we can think about it. Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I'll start with the bulkhead and the rooftop. I think it's minimally visible. And there's a varied streetscape. So I think that it's acceptable and appropriate. The front facade, I understand that you need to do something in terms of making it waterproof. So the elastomeric waterproofing, if we use it for other historic structures, it sounds like a reasonable solution. The color with the door is fine with me. The only thing I found a little bit odd, and it sounds like it's not bothering the other commissioners as much, is some type of a surround for the door. I noticed that the other doors that you had shown as examples all had something surrounding the door, even though it was fairly simple. So I'd be curious to hear what the other commissioners think about that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
A very thoughtful, I thought through details by these architects. I'll start with the coding. If the coding system is approved by LPC, it's fine with me. The door issue for me is the color is fine, but what it does, and maybe I'm being a little finicky, is it makes me look at the band. And then when I look at the band and I see the difference there, I say, wow, but maybe just being a little too fussy. And if it was quieter color, you wouldn't see it, but decision by the architects. The facade is simple and basic. It's fine. The rear facade, however, the windows on the top. I read somewhere last night that someone commented on the size of the top windows, and I thought that made sense, that they should be about the size of what was existing. And that way keep some kind of historic fabric there rather than making it larger.
So, yeah, I mean, the back of the building is a later addition to the building, which is 5 stories, a story taller than the front of the building.
That's true. But then I thought, it's been there for a while. So I thought, why not have the same windows rather, because what happens on the floor below, it's smaller. If you go to the elevation, it seems to be the floor below is smaller and the ones on the top are larger, unless I'm making a mistake.
Yeah.
You see, they seem smaller than the ones in the top. They're longer. So I don't understand. But I do understand, but I thought. The scale and size should match the existing windows for continuity.
Okay.
That could be decided by the staff. Replacing the infill appropriate and rooftop bulkhead, although visible, necessary and fits in with the site.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think that the bulkhead and the chimney are appropriate and the railings that are minimally visible. The door, the color does kind of call attention to itself, but it is reversible. And I assume it's not going to really be like a day glow the way it is shown in the rendering. I mean, they could have also used the blue, which is a little softer, but I think it's just within the discretion of the owner in this case, not to worry about it. I do think that because of the height of the door, if there's any way to shorten it slightly from the top, as was suggested, I think obviously the bottom has to align. I don't know if it is possible or not. But otherwise, I can certainly approve it as presented. The coating, we sometimes have concerns about any coating, but in this case, there's so much that's been put on the building already that it's not a question of let's not paint the brick, but and I know that this is a breathable coating, and I'll go along with what the architects on the panel think about its appropriateness in this case. So, basically I can approve it as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. This is a tough one for me because it is so old. This is a very old building, and unfortunately it's been treated perhaps cavalierly over the years, and it's been heavily modified and impacted by things that have been done to it. So, for the front door, I was originally troubled by the cutting of the band, but I mean, I think that it seems like it was, like he said, probably a stoop, probably a sideways stoop that went up to the smaller left window that is off center. That probably was the front door. And if that's not going to be in the cards for this proposal, which it need not be, I think that, modifying an area of the facade that was itself modified in the past with the removal of the door. I mean, that band was probably there, but was probably behind the stairs, the stoop. So I don't think that that's terrible, I guess. But, and especially kind of paired with the carriage house door next door to it, which kind of has a similar proportion and proximity to the property line. I think it kind of works. And I think that, resisting my urge to fuss it up, I think the architect was right, even if it's perhaps unadorned and perhaps a little brutal. I think it's okay. I do really feel that the coating is a sad state of affairs, and I personally would urge the staff to be vigilant in seeing if the removal of the layers of coatings is feasible before approving another layer on top of this very old brick. You could have the greatest coating in the world, but there's 5 layers of oil-based lead paint underneath it. ain't nothing breathing. So I don't think that that's, necessarily the solution here. And if we're in, part of our job is to protect the fabric of the building. And I think that the staff should look very carefully at that front facade and determine if, as an assembly, the current skin is in danger. And if, let's see if there's bubbling, see if there's any cracking, really look at it carefully. And if in fact, we're just putting lipstick on a pig here, I think that different actions should be taken. I don't think that I hear what Everardo is saying about the rear facade, and I think he's not wrong that there is history here. But because it's an individual kind of not part of a row, and because the rear yard addition was functional in nature, I can accept the changes to the windows at the back as presented.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I do think the applicant said that they were going to be trying to remove what they could and sounding out the stucco, identifying areas that needed to be patched and really treating it before doing a reapplication of any coating. So we'll approve this with the modification that they do that very carefully and work with staff on that, as well as the brick selection on the rear facade. And I think we're there. So Commissioner Ginsburg, would you be okay with that?
Yes, thank you. In the matter of LPC 23-04336 32 Jane Street, Greenwich Village Historic District, a row house built in 1826 and altered in the late 19th century. Application is to apply coating system at the front and side facades, modify openings at the entrance and rear facade, replace infill and construct a rooftop bulkhead and chimney. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I find that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural or historic features of the building, that raising the below-grade entrance opening, which resulted from prior alterations that removed the stoop, will help provide barrier-free access to the home, that the paneled wood replacement doors will be simply designed and typical in terms of material and configuration. The painting, the band course gray to match the main facade color, will be in keeping with a variety of color schemes typical of the facades altered in the late 19th and early 20th century, that the proposed bulkhead, chimney extension, and railings will be simply designed and typical in terms of material and profiles, and only visible from the public thoroughfares over secondary facades within the context of a varied streetscape featuring buildings of different heights and miscellaneous rooftop accretions, that the proposed alteration to the rear facade, including eliminating, shifting, and combining openings to correspond with realigned interior floors, will not be visible from the public thoroughfare, and that the new composition of the rear facade will feature material and fenestrations that are keeping with the historic character of the house. I also find that the applicant should work with staff as the front material is stripped off the stucco to see if a breathable masonry paint will work or if the acrylic coating is needed. And so I recommend approval with that caveat.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, Mark. John, call the
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
So please continue to work with the staff on those details. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
We'll now move to public hearing item number 3, LPC 23-09651. An application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 552, Lot 47, 122 Waverly Place in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a house built in 1835. The application is to install ironwork and a stoop gate.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Larissa, please unmute yourself and I will give you control of the slides.
Great.
Please click on your screen and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Great. Sorry. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Larissa Jimenez from DHD, and we are working on the project at 122 Waverly Place in Greenwich Village. The scope of the proposed work is the addition of a privacy gate at the existing stoop, as well as increasing the height of the existing railing to the cellar steps at the front of the house, adjacent to the stoop. This first slide just shows some context, the tax lot photo, the view of the existing building, showing the stoop, the existing side railings on the stoop, as well as the existing railing at the stair down to the cellar. This next page just includes the historic district, the Greenwich Village map. We've provided some images of the existing front facade, the existing stoop and side railings, and the existing railing at the steps down to the cellar. And the owner has a family with 4 children who are all young, and they had been staying at the house prior to the start of construction. And just, you know, even while we started construction, noticed that there were a lot of visitors in the area gate down to the cellar, as well as on the stoop. So initially they installed just this chain on the stoop, just to sort of try to keep people off of the stoop, as well as the stairs down to the cellar, which were often being used as a restroom. So the main goal is to just provide an increased level of security for the house and for the family. And that's the goal with this proposed scope of work. So we've included an existing elevation just showing the existing stoop and railings, along with a proposed elevation indicating the proposed gates at the stoop, as well as the increased height of the new railing at the steps down to the cellar. And we would match the design of the existing railing, just to increase the height of it overall. And this is an enlarged view of that proposed gate at the front steps, as well as the taller railing at the steps to the cellar. And the height that we've increased the railing down to the cellar aligns with the height of the existing side railings at the stoop. And you can see, you know, relative to the old original railing, the existing is a bit lower. Is a bit higher, sorry, compared to the existing. So we're, you know, going above that height, but it is a bit higher than the existing. And we have included some adjacent or nearby examples of gates that have been installed on stoops. One is right across the street at 119 Waverly, and this is similar very similar to what we are proposing for 122 Waverly, and have just included a few examples at 133rd West 3rd and 133 West 4th, which I believe have recently were recently approved by landmarks. And oops, sorry, the last slide just has some additional views of the 119 Waverly front gate and context of the streetscape at 122 Waverly, which in these photos is sort of hidden behind a temporary construction fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have questions on this one? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Is there an elevation with the adjacent building so we can see how it all relates together? Because it's hard to see from these photos.
I'm sorry, is there, it broke up a little bit.
Elevation with the adjacent building so we can see how this fits into the streetscape, because it's hard to see from the photo. Right, you've got this building, but what's happening next door?
Understood. We do not have an elevation, but there is, we can prepare one just showing the adjacent buildings. There is no gate or stoop at 120 Waverly, this building to the left, which you can see in the tax lot photo here. And that's, you know, the existing condition today. And then at 124 Waverly, there is a stoop and railing, so we can include that in the elevation, just showing context on either side.
It might be helpful, just in the interest of time today, if you go to that streetscape photo montage and just maybe go from left to right and say whether there's a stoop or whether there is, even without a stoop, an areaway fence.
Sure. So at this is the south side of the block where 122 is located. So there is no fence or areaway at 120 Waverly. Currently at 124 Waverly, this sort of yellow mustard building, there is a stoop. Of course, there's cars blocking the view, but there is a stoop and a railing existing.
Okay, and what's at the next building to the right of that?
This is an apartment building that does not have any areaway or railing.
Okay. All right, and I see that, I guess the other two photos are not as immediately adjacent.
Yeah, these are looking north. They're on the north side of 122 of Waverly, sorry.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Do you know if the other neighbors who, have similar problems that your client has?
Yes, I know there is a big push on the block to address this as well. But the neighbor to the left, who does not have a stoop or entryway, doesn't really have any place for people to gather. So I think it's probably less of an issue for her. But I know that there are issues, or there have been complaints from the neighbor at 124.
Like at 119 Waverly, which you show on this slide, they still have a problem, or have they been able to get rid of their problem with their gate on the stoop?
Yeah, the gate has helped alleviate the.
What about their areaway is also totally fine now?
Yeah.
No.
Not the areaway, because it is still pretty low. They don't have a lock on it.
Yeah, well, that was a question that occurred to me. What about putting a lock?
Well, so the existing, they did. The existing railing it's low enough for somebody to sort of hop over, which people still continue to do.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Jefferson.
curious about this popping over. Is that documented? How, because typically when you have a gate, most people just don't leap over them. Do you need to raise it, what, 4'6" or something? What's the scale that you have? The height,
The proposed height would, to the top of the spikes, it's 5 feet. So it's about 4 foot. It's 4'2" to the horizontal top of the gate.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
How has the chain worked? Has it helped at all in preventing people from?
It did not, when it, the time that it was installed. And that was, once they started construction, they erected the temporary fence pretty quickly just to help keep people off of the stoop and in the areaway.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions, Commissioner Master?
So a similar question is, the height of the gate that we're putting in, how does that relate to the height of other gates in the neighborhood?
So we can just provide some, go measure all of these references and provide a survey of the adjacent gates, for example.
Right. And I assume that the height is based on, it's a security issue, which is why it's a little higher than.
Right.
Normally put in.
Security, and then we sort of determine the height based on they align with the existing side railings on the stoop.
So my other question is, I noticed that you have spikes on the top of the fence. Is that decorative or was there a purpose behind that?
Both. Decorative, but also as a way to sort of deter anybody from trying to scale the gate and get over.
Okay. All right. And just quickly, I'm looking at Google Street View and I can see that apartment building to the right of yours goes all the way to the corner.
Yes.
And then there's the yellow building with the stoop. And then you have an areaway fence that looks to be a little taller than your existing, but shorter than your proposed, more along the lines of this height of your fence at the time of the tax photo.
Correct.
The building next to you is as it is in the tax photo. And then there's a truck, unfortunately, in the view, but it looks about 2 buildings down. There's another fence that is similar in height to the one that we see in the tax photo, and that's evident on the yellow building next to you. So a little bit of information. There's many of the buildings at the other end look like they've been altered with commercial businesses at the lower floors. All right. If there are no other questions, we'll move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? All right, noting that no one in the room would like to speak on this item, I will turn it over to Gregory Collard to take us through our remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups beforehand for this item. The first we'll be hearing from is Chloe Gregoire. And Chloe Gregoire, I am promoting you to panelist right now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello again, Commissioners. My name is Chloe Gregoire, and I'm speaking on behalf of Village Preservation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. While we lament the installation of non-historic stoop gates, we appreciate the need to do so at this particular location for safety reasons. We can also understand the desire to increase the height of the areaway fence, but ask the applicants to consider only raising it to meet the approximate height of the historic fence as seen in the 1940s tax photo. Overall, the ironwork design is fine, but we feel the proposed spikes at the top of the fence may be inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Michelle Arbalou from the Historic Districts Council. So Michelle Arbalou, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Michelle Arblou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC is against stoop gates as a general principle because they are anti-urban. If the applicant must have a gate, it should be no higher than the level of the existing ironwork, which should remain as is. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society in New York. So Christina Conroy, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, we understand the neighborhood conditions driving this fortress-like proposal, but find that architecturally it just isn't appropriate. We've provided an alternate tax photo in our written testimony that more clearly shows the ironwork. The balcony area and the stoop ironwork are all different, but coordinated in their details. The ironwork is a very intentional part of the significant 1919 alteration that added studio windows with steel casements, flower box balconies, a stucco finish, and wooden shutters with cutout parts and now, the specific alteration to Waverly is called out in Anne Cart's book, The Row House Reborn. The stucco shutters have unfortunately been removed, but the alteration is otherwise intact. We believe the existing historic areaway fence is maintained. It is the correct height for the building, street, and district. The proposed taller fence is not, and doesn't incorporate the fine fluting on the posts of the original that matches the posts on the stoop. Although we really don't like adding gates to stoops, it appears that the owners have already tried a chain, and a stoop gate matching the height and details of the existing areaway fence might be appropriate. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you so much, Christina, for your testimony. And I believe Jeremy Woodhoff would also like to speak in person.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Woodhoff speaking, adding to the Victorian Society's testimony. I have been looking at the photograph, and I believe that the walls on the side of the stoop have actually been raised since the tax photo was taken, making it look as though the existing fence is shorter than the one that was there. I believe it's the same height. And as I said, the stoop platform at the front door has been lifted, as well as the walls on the side of the stoop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I'm looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends that the commission reconsider the approval of the highly inappropriate tall spiked fence in the area way, and notwithstanding the tall fences in other quite different buildings in the district, instead recommending a fence more in keeping with the historic design of the building and typical to the district. Denial of the stairgate for its total lack of character or historic reference and its awkward placement with no attempt to integrate it into the building, and denial of any consideration by the commission of the application for the excavation and garden until the incomplete application is extensively revised, including accurate depictions of the conditions and of the proposed work and full engineering information explaining in detail the steps to be taken to ensure the ongoing integrity of the subject property and the neighboring properties, and that this revised application is presented before a public hearing for recommendations by the Board of Commission. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carol.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we've heard testimony about the existing conditions versus the historic conditions, and maybe if you could respond to that and explain to us if there have been changes to the existing steps and how that might affect one's reading or interpretation of the heights. I think that would be helpful. The community board commented on excavation, which doesn't appear to be before us today. I don't know if that's something that you want to address, but I think if you can address the heights, that would be very helpful.
Sure. The excavation was removed from the scope of work. They're no longer looking to do that. So the heights, we would need to, verify it and confirm exactly what the side railings and the side walls are on site, but it does appear there's a taller, they were extended in height a few inches if you sort of refer to the existing platform and the fact that it is aligned with the old wall as compared to the wall that is there now. And in that case, then yes, the railings would be likely in line with the height of the existing. Here's a better photo. So between the tax lot photo and this photo, it appears it was increased a few inches.
Okay, so it seems likely that the height of the existing fence is pretty close to the height of the fence shown in the tax photo. Okay. All right, Commissioner, is there anything you'd like to say in response to the comments before we move to our discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Any final questions, commissioners? All right, let's move to close the hearing. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is a proposal to replace the existing areaway fence with a taller fence that includes sort of people deterring spikes on top, and to do a gate at the stoop. And as I'll remind you that the commission has in certain instances approved gates at the bottom of stoops, particularly when the building is not part of a row of tall stoops and is on a varied streetscape with some commercial and other building typologies, so that it's not disrupting a kind of uniform residential character. And I think the applicant did show examples of stoop gates that the commission has approved, including one directly across the street at 119 Waverly Place. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one? Excuse me. Okay. And I know we have approved fences, areaway fences, and also entrance fences to deal with that issue. I think there are a couple things here. It just seems, number one, proportionately, that the fence is just a little too high. And also that the spikes at the top of the fence, I mean, I think the design just doesn't work very well. So if you're going to have some kind of spike, and that those spikes in particular seem kind of deadly. They're very aggressive. But if you're going to have spikes, then I feel that the bottom of the fence needs to be more simplified. And, you know, with a lower fence, even let's say a more traditional spike at the top, visually can also be a deterrent. I think people would think twice before trying to hop over it.
Yeah, exactly. So that actually would be my recommendation. It just it needs to either the applicant would work with staff on this to make the height and proportions and design work a little better. And if those spikes are going to be there to simplify everything, or they should just come back. I mean, depending upon what everyone else thinks.
Oops, Commissioner Master.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I agree with Commissioner Lefty that security is clearly a big issue here. And you want them to feel safe. And I can understand why you have the height of the fence where it is, where you're trying to match it to the side railings. And so on one hand, it does look symmetrical because everything does line up. I'd really love to know if this height is out of proportion and if other folks in the neighborhood have a height of fence that's this height. The spikes are a little off-putting, and yet I understand that they're serving a certain purpose. But I'm wondering if there's something else, an alternative solution. So I'm a little bit torn on this one.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, if you go to page 5 out of 9, the other elevation. Can we do that? The fifth one, at 5 out of 9. I think it says 5 of 9. I think 6 of 9, I guess, is the one I'm looking for. That's the one. And it's very interesting. It's security or proportion, right? And in this case, if you look at the left-hand side, proportions are quite elegant. You know, it's really beautiful. And the other side is, it changes the whole thing. So my compromise is just put the gate and have the gate in and keep the proportion the same.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I certainly sympathize with the applicant, and as Commissioner Ludwig pointed out, we have many times permitted this kind of gate based on the security issues and problems that people have. I think that, in this case, I'd like to see them just retain the historic fence and put in a gate that is, appropriately matched with the current fence. And hopefully that will be sufficient to address the problem, because it'll make a united front across the front and make it clear that, this is not accessible. But I mean, if it doesn't work, then at least, we could then review heightening the other fence. But I would think that the middle gate, because it's going to be taller in effect than the side, because to make it match up should then be sufficient. And unfortunately, the current thing with the spikes and the height really just looks inappropriate.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. I generally agree with what everybody else has been saying. I think that the height of 5 feet off of the sidewalk is for me too high. The object lesson of the Upper East Side, which has in some blocks the feel of a fortress and a very off-putting streetscape, a kind of defensiveness and aggressiveness that I think would be very unfortunate to carry into the village. That said, I think that some of the suggestions made were totally appropriate. I would add to the array of options. I think that the applicant could consider, I think that the maximum height for such a fence should be no taller than 4 feet. Once it gets above 4 feet, it starts to kind of feel like it's kind of impinging on your ability to walk by it. You kind of have to get further away from it. So I would say that above 4 feet is really a limit for me. I think that there is a strong tradition architecturally of having pickets or posts or pikes on top of fences, but it should be done in a way that's consistent with the design of the 1920s renovation, or 20s, 30s, I forget. The elevation shows these kind of little squiggly tongue-shaped things that are not quite in aligning with the pickets below. There's also, it looks like an inaccuracy in the drawing where there's maybe a couple of inches between the bottom rail of the fence on the existing drawing and the stone curb below it, whereas the actual fence looks like it has maybe four or more inches between that curb and the space, the first horizontal rail. And that's one thing that I think that they could do. If they're, I think the picture is probably more accurate, but I think that raising the base could be doable as well. This is not, I think they could consider also raising the curb a little bit, so that if you could preserve the historic material, that'd be great. But that's not a deal breaker for me if they proposed a new fence. But I think it shouldn't go above 4 feet.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree with my fellow commissioners, particularly Commissioner Jefferson, that the gate as is, the proportions are so much better. But I do have a suggestion. I think the gate at the door and the steps is fine, although it should be coordinated with the other. You can get lights that are either dual level or have a motion detector. So you could make it so if somebody steps into that areaway, it gets very bright and discourages them from doing anything in a way that wouldn't affect the aesthetics. And I think there are some other options that should be looked at.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree. The colleagues' sensitive comments, I think they're all valid observations and suggestions. Somehow when the G was mentioning about, I came up the image that pops into my mind is about, the aggressiveness of this bike on top of the fence. About, occasionally you hear tragic stories about children falling out window and being on the fence. That's what the image comes to mind. Maybe that's coffee I've been drinking this morning, but I just think that it's a little bit too aggressive.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think where we are is we have, I think a couple of commissioners have expressed a preference to keep the existing fence, but I think it's not the fence that was in the tax photo. The majority of the other commissioners are okay with approving a fence here, except that it should be no more than 4 feet and be proportional to the building in the way that the fence was in the tax photo, and be of a design that incorporates finials in lieu of these sort of spikes, and is a design that's consistent with the 1919 alterations to the building, and that the gate, the presence of a gate is fine, but that it be coordinated with the fence. And the staff routinely approves ironwork, various designs, and I think the staff can work with the applicant on making these modifications. So, Commissioner Lutfi, would you be comfortable with approving it with the modification that they redesign and lower the height and redesign the fence, and that lower the height of the gate to relate to the fence in consultation with the staff? Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Okay, in the matter of docket 23-09651, 122 Waverly Place, Greenwich Village Historic District. A house built in 1835. The application is to install ironwork and a stoop gate. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed gate will not be attached to the historic ironwork at the stoop and will only be attached at the resurfaced masonry treads and cheek walls. Therefore, the work will not damage any significant features. That the building's location between busy commercial thoroughfares has led to pervasive trespassing issues and safety concerns. That this building is not part of a row, therefore the presence of a stoop gate and tall areaway ironwork will not diminish the relationship of this building to other buildings on the block or the relationship of the stoop to the sidewalk. That historic photographs show precedent for an areaway fence that is taller than the existing modern fence. That the relatively simple design of the black finished metal gate and fence will help it remain subordinate to the historic ironwork at the stoop, and that the work will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the building or the Greenwich Village Historic District. However, I find that the height of the proposed fence and gate exceeds the predominant height of ironwork in the streetscape, and that the spikes atop the areaway fence do not align with the pickets below and seem at odds with the overall design of the fence. I therefore recommend that the applicant work very closely with staff to reduce the height of the fence and gate so that the fence is no taller than 4 feet in height, and that it incorporates finials that are consistent with design. Yeah. So the design is consistent with the 1919 alterations, and that the gate at the front stoop be lowered as well.
Right, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thanks, John. Will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved, but please continue to work with the staff on the height and design. And we'll now move to the next item.
Thank you.
And before we do that, I do want to note a schedule change due to a last minute layover. We will not be hearing item 6, which was 398 Pacific Street in the Borum Hill Historic District. That will be laid over and presented at a future public hearing date. So just noting that in advance. And now I'm going to read in the next 2 items into the record, both together. They will be presented by the same applicant, but they are 2 separate items. First is item number 4, LPC 23-04474, an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, multiple blocks and lots, multiple street beds. This is an application to install pedestrian crosswalks into the Belgian block street beds. And also item 5, LPC 24-02098. An application for a binding report in the Borough of Brooklyn, blocks 201 and 202, Elizabeth Place and Doughty Street, the intersections in the Fulton Ferry Historic District. Also a street bed, and the application again is to install a pedestrian crosswalk into the Belgian block street bed.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Corenzo, if you could unmute yourself, I will give you control of the presentation. Please click on your screen and state your name for the record. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Corinza Wilkerson. I'm the engineer in charge at the Department of Design and Construction. And we're here to talk to you about some granite paver crosswalks that are located in some of the historic districts. The locations, as was stated earlier, are in the boroughs of Manhattan and Brooklyn, and they're covering the projects HWP 19 CWLM, HWPR 19 MC1, HWPR 20 MKL, and HWP 2020 LM. What we plan on discussing this afternoon is just the locations list, the project's objectives, some of the proposed treatments. We're going to go over the existing and proposed conditions and then project timelines. So to start out with the project location list, for CWLM, we have 2 locations in which we'll be replacing the Belgian block with a granite paver crosswalk at the intersections of J Street and Staple Street, Light Street and Closter Street. And then for the project of HWPR 19 MC1, it'll be for J Street and Greenwich Street, Harrison Street and Greenwich Street, Vestry Street and Washington Street, Watts Street and Greenwich Street, and Prince Street and Worcester Street. And then for the project HWPR 20 MKL, the location that we're going to be working at is Grand Street and Worcester Street. And then finally for HWP 2020 LM, we'll be working at Elizabeth Place and Daughtry Street in Brooklyn. Here we have the project location maps in Manhattan. And as you notice on the top left-hand side, we have 2 locations that are currently in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, 3 locations that are in the Tribeca North Historic District, and 3 locations that are in the Tribeca West Historic District. And then on our Brooklyn project location map, you'll notice we have 1 location in the Fulton Ferry Historic District. So what are our project objectives? Well, mainly we're updating the pedestrian ramps to be ADA compliant. But as a result of this, the crosswalks have to be upgraded as well at all the locations where we're working to make them ADA compliant in relation to city and state and federal guidelines. So as a result, we're going to be using standard New York City DOT materials, pigmented concrete sidewalk, and New York historic granite curb. And we'll also be using the granite paver crosswalks that we've used in several other locations within the city. So the proposed treatment, as you can see on the left-hand side, this is an intersection that was done in downtown Brooklyn. I believe it's near Water Street, where the granite paver crosswalk was installed. And we have 2 by 3 foot granite pavers abutting or adjacent to the 3 by 5 inch granite block pavers. And what we're going to be installing has a textured finish, so it's slip resistant, but most importantly, it's ADA compliant, which provides a smooth surface so that individuals who have disabilities or in wheelchairs or with canes and walkers, they'll be able to walk across the street and not have any trip hazards. On our next slide, we have an example on the left-hand side from a bird's eye view as to what would be seen just looking down at the street. So the granite paver crosswalks, they're abutted on the north and the south sides with a granite header. And then we have alternating rows of 3 by 5 granite blocks with the 2 by 3 foot granite pavers. And on the right-hand side of our slide, we have just a cross-section of how all of the new materials are going to be supported in the roadway. Everything will be supported by a 9-inch concrete bed, which will help to provide stability so that nothing subsides or sinks, and it'll have a nice, even and smooth surface. The granite pavers and blocks would also be on a mortar base as shown in our cross-section. Continuing with our proposed treatment, this is a location that was previously approved by LPC. This is at the intersection of Vestry Street and Hudson Street in Lower Manhattan, and this is in the Tribeca North Historic District. And as you can see, we have our historic Belgian block, which was redone, and then we have our granite paver crosswalk, which takes elements from the existing Belgian block and it has it incorporated, but it also provides a nice delineated surface so that individuals can see where the crosswalk is, but it's also a smooth surface so that there's it's ADA compliant. And our next slide just shows a nice close-up where we can see the granite block pavers and how they're really interlaced with one another to provide a nice cohesive surface. Now we're going to go into existing conditions. So for HWP 19 CWLM at J Street and Staple Street, we're working on all 4 of the corners. So we're going to be redoing all 4 of the crosswalks. Currently now you can see Belgian block that's at each in the roadway at the whole intersection. Now what we plan on doing and what we have proposed is what we see here, where we have our granite paver crosswalks at a standard typical DOT width of 8 feet. And we have, as we mentioned earlier, our 2 foot by 3 foot pavers with our 3 by 5 inch granite blocks, and then we have our headers. But all 4 corners are going to be done, so the crosswalks have to be done at each of these locations. Our next location is Light Street and Gloucester Street. We're only working on the southern side of this intersection. And you can see the existing granite block pavers that are already there. And we're just going to be providing the crosswalk in the section where we're installing the new ramps, and the rest of the street will remain with the Belgian block as shown. Our next location for MC1 is J Street and Greenwich Street. And this has the same configuration that we mentioned earlier at Vestry and Hudson, where the roadway along Greenwich Street is basically asphalt with a concrete base, but the crosswalk area is Belgian block, and we're planning on replacing that, as you see on the right-hand side of our screen, with the granite paver crosswalk as shown. Our next location is Harrison and Greenwich Street, and this is a similar location. We're only working on the eastern side of the intersection, and so we're only redoing the ramps over there. So we're going to provide the crosswalk on that section as shown in our depiction here. Our next location for MC1 is Vestry Street and Washington Street. Now we're working on all four corners, but the Belgian block is only on the side street of Vestry Street, and that's where we plan on putting the this granite paver crosswalk as shown here on the right in our proposed depiction. Our next location is Watt Street and Greenwich Street. We're only working on the western side of the intersection, and so we're going to provide a granite paver crosswalk for this area right here as shown. And we see in our left-hand image the Belgian block that's currently there, which we'll replace with the granite paver crosswalk. Our next location is Prince Street and Worcester Street. Now, as you notice here, the granite pavers have been removed by other utility cuts that have happened over the years. Maybe it was via some of the other public utilities, electric or gas, or maybe fiber optics. But you notice that there's not a cohesive or homogeneous walking surface for this crosswalk on either side of the intersection as shown. So what we plan on doing on the northern and southern sides, where the existing Belgian block was, we'll provide the granite paver crosswalks for those. And then along Prince Street, it was already asphalt with a concrete bed. We're just going to put it back to asphalt with the thermoplastic, as you have shown here. Our next location is Grand Street and Worcester Street. This is a part of HWPR 20 MKL. And similar situation where there's been many utility cuts over the past few years, and it's a non-homogeneous surface, which makes it very difficult to cross, especially for those with disabilities. So we're working on both sides of the intersection, as we can see in our next slide here, and we plan on putting both granite paver crosswalks on the northern and southern side of the street, as shown along Worcester Street. And our last location is Elizabeth Street and Daughtry Street. So we can see here the existing Belgian block that we have. And then in our next slide, we have the new pedestrian ramps that we're installing, but also the new granite paver crosswalk, which is nice and wide. So just project timelines to know where we are with regard to these projects. With project CWLM, we have gone out to bid with regard to this project. For HWPR 19 MC1, we're in the pre-bid stage. And then for HWPR MKL, we're in final design phase, and we plan on going out for bid at the end of the year. And for HWP 2020 LM, we're in final design, and it's on the same schedule. We plan on going out to bid at the end of the year. And that is the end of our presentation.
All right, thank you. Do you want to do the Brooklyn one first? Oh, okay, they did that first. Okay, yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I have a question. Are you doing repairs of the Belgian block on the streets when you do these crosswalks?
Can you repeat the question one more time? It broke up at
Are
toward
you
the end.
doing repairs of Belgian block on the streets as you do these crosswalks?
So our main focus is just where the crosswalk is located. So at that location, that's where we're going to be putting the granite paver crosswalk, as we showed earlier. Anywhere else during the rest of the street is going to remain with its existing condition. So the Belgian blocks, if we have to pick up some, then they'll be cleaned and then replaced and put back and installed.
All right, other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
I have a question on your diagrams. If you take diagram 16 of 27,
Which intersection is that?
like 16 of 27. Okay, you have
I don't have a page on here, so that's.
it says here 16 of 27 in my, well, there are two issues. You use pigmented concrete in certain pieces at the corner, and then in other places you use you seem to have two different approaches. One is granite, and then one is pigmented concrete. How do you? What's the?
So
which one is this one? This one is 18 or 19 of 27.
So this one's 16, and then you said 18?
Yeah, because it's just, you change the materials at the corner, and I was trying to understand the conceptual reason for that.
So where we have existing concrete, we're going to be putting back pigmented concrete, which is a New York City DOT standard material, and it's approved by LPC. And at all the locations where we're putting this pigmented concrete, we will be putting the New York historic granite curb. For locations where the sidewalk is of a granite material, we're going to keep the granite material, and it'll either be the contractor will cut a ramp into that or grind it down, or a new piece of granite will be furnished, which will match the existing.
Great, thanks. And one other issue, where it's this black thing, thermoplastic pavement, what is that?
So as you notice on the slide here, on the right-hand side, you see on the bottom right-hand corner, on the bottom left-hand corner, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's the pavement marking there. So you see where the trash can is on the picture on the right. And then if you go into the roadway, that white bar, the crosswalk, the material is called thermoplastic, but basically it's the crosswalk material, standard material.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, other questions? Okay, and I think as I have seen in most of these photos, this proposed crosswalk paving is usually at a transition point between a street that's Belgian block that's meeting a street that's asphalt, right? I don't think they're really occurring in the middle of a field of Belgian block.
There's only one location, which is I believe it's the first location. Let me just go back to that slide, which is at J and Staple, where the whole intersection is Belgian block. So I'm going to go back there. So this location right now, there's Belgian block everywhere, and the Belgian block will still be retained in the middle of the intersection. It's just the crosswalks are what we were replacing with the granite pavers.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, we'll move to testimony, and we may have more questions after that. Jeremy Woodoff.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Woodoff, today speaking both for myself and for the Victorian Society, New York. We are pleased and surprised to see this very appropriate proposal brought to a public hearing. Pleased because the proposed crosswalks are closely modeled after 19th century granite crosswalks installed historically throughout the city in cobblestone and granite block streets. Surprised because these crosswalks have for decades been approved and installed in granite streets in historic districts as components of projects reviewed both by the LPC staff and the commissioners at public hearing. In fact, the design and mandate for these crosswalks originated with the commission itself in conjunction with the Department of Transportation. I know this because when I was on the commission staff, I wrote the standards which included them. And I'm horrified to realize that was 30 years ago, but nonetheless, it happened. These standards encompass the full range of features in public rights of way in historic districts, including street surfaces, curbs, sidewalks, pedestrian ramps, crosswalks, street lighting, and traffic signals. And the section on crosswalks begins on page 5. The commission reviewed the proposed standards, including the crosswalks, and I don't recall if it was at a public meeting or a public hearing, and approved them, as did the Public Design Commission. It was hoped that the standards would be adopted as rules. While that didn't happen, they have been de facto standards for decades. As seen in the presentation materials, and so well presented by Corenzo, the proposed crosswalks already exist at other locations, all approved by the commission. There are very few extant fragments of the historic crosswalks on which the design is based. One was recently restored and incorporated into a larger crosswalk on Little West 12th Street as part of the Gansevoort 9th Avenue area street reconstruction. This can be seen in the photo attached to our written testimony. Several others are being restored at Dumbo as part of that ongoing street reconstruction. Most extant historic granite block paving in the city is of standard form dating to the early 20th century. In a few locations, there are older blocks, and when these older blocks are disturbed for crosswalks, it would be wise to salvage them for reuse. Otherwise, the removal of small areas of 20th century granite pavement to install granite crosswalks is, we believe, appropriate. We encourage the commission to continue to endorse this crosswalk design and approve the proposed installation of these crosswalks within granite block street beds. Thank you.
I believe Jeremy was the only in-person speaker. If you are in person and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand now. Okay, and we received one sign up in advance for this item, that being Michelle Arbalou from the Historic Districts Council. So Michelle Arbalou, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC supports the proposed crosswalks as part of the LPC item for multiple street beds and the installation in the Fulton Ferry Historic District. Cobblestone and granite block streets are an integral part of the historic streetscape and the character of many historic districts, including Fulton Ferry, Dumbo, and Gansevoort Market. However, over time, the integrity of these places have eroded with modern intrusions. The proposed crosswalks are closely modeled after the 19th century granite crosswalks installed historically throughout the city in cobblestone and granite block streets. We know the commission has previously approved this design at other locations, and others are proposed as part of the reconstruction efforts in Dumbo. We would encourage the commission to consider adopting standards around the reconstruction of historic crosswalks as part of its rules in the future, which would help guide the staff and commissioners on the appropriateness of this design. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that for the Tribeca North, West, and Soho Cast Iron part of this application, Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends approval, but requests a presentation from the DOT to review all relevant locations within the historic district going forward. The piecemeal approach is not satisfactory to CB1, and a more homogeneous solution is requested. And then for the Elizabeth Place and Doughty Street application, Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends conditional approval with the below comments. The Doughty Street and Elizabeth Place sidewalks are not ADA compliant, and the ramps will be offset from the corners for grading fit. In effect, these ramps will be ramps to nowhere, and the intended beneficiaries will likely be forced to use the street anyway. The committee recommends the south intersection of Elizabeth Place and Old Fulton Street, the north end of the proposed block, as a more useful alternative. And they also asked to please be mindful of the location, quantity, and capacity of all relocated catch basins as this location is within a flood zone. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you, Gregory. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to any of the comments we've heard.
We're in favor of all those comments, and we've been incorporating them as much as possible. We reiterated to DOT, especially what Community Board 1 brought to our attention when we met with them, of a more homogeneous approach to all the crosswalks. But at DDC, we can only do what's been assigned to us, and we reconstruct and we try to do our best to make sure that all the citizens of New York are taken care of.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Leffey, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as was pointed out in both the presentation and in the testimony, this is a detail that we have approved at other locations where there are cobblestone streets. And so they're proposing it, the sidewalks and the ramps down on the sidewalks are eligible for a staff level approval. Is that right, Corey? Okay, so we're really focusing on the cobblestone and the Belgian block treatment for the crosswalks. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, sir. I think that this is very appropriate. The materials being used are appropriate, and it's very necessary, insertion into the streetscape. And I think it's being done, with care and, with the minimal amount that's needed to accomplish its purpose. So I can certainly support this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldman?
I agree. I've seen them installed. They look really good.
All right, Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree, but I would like to add one thing. As a resident of Tribeca, the Belgian block is often a roller coaster, and it wasn't installed well or so on. And with this opportunity, when you're repairing the crosswalks, one should look at repairing the entire street as needed, so you're not going back in a few years and doing other construction work. But I think that what they're proposing is totally appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
I agree as well. I just have the comment that sometimes, some of the surfaces are quite slippery. So when they say texture, I just encourage the city that the coefficient of friction be as high as possible, given the climate change and the rainy weather. That it takes us just a small slip, then we have an issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree, and I think the comments just made by Wellington and Mark were good additions.
Okay, thanks. And Commissioner Master?
I agree. Appropriate.
Okay, and Commissioner Jefferson?
Appropriate.
Okay, all right, so I think we can move to approve this. Commissioner Chapin, would you make the first motion, which is item number 4?
They salvage this Belgian block when they can also, don't they, for use and other.
And when they do street repairs where there is Belgian block, the idea is to remove it, repair it, clean it, and reset it. And only if that's not possible do they replace.
Thank you. A binding report, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 23-04474, multiple street beds, multiple. Application is to install pedestrian crosswalks into the Belgian block street beds. I note that the Belgian block paving is among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca North, Tribeca West, and Soho cast iron historic districts. I recommend approval, finding that the minimum amount of historic paving will be removed to facilitate ADA compliance, that the proposed larger granite pavers will match the historic Belgian block pavers in terms of material, while complying with the ADA accessibility requirements of a smooth surface. That the large size of the granite pavers will help to visually delineate the crosswalk areas from the adjacent street beds, that the crosswalks mark a transition point from historic Belgian block paving to modern asphalt paving at most of the street beds, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca North, Tribeca West, and Soho cast iron historic districts.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So that one's approved. And Commissioner Chan, would you lead the motion for item number 5? Yeah.
In the matter of LPC 24-02098 Elizabeth Place and Doddy Place, Fulton's Ferry Historic District. The application is to install a pedestrian crosswalk into the Belgian block street bed. Noting the Belgian block paving is among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Fulton Ferry Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the minimum amount of historic paving will be removed to facilitate ADA compliance, that the proposed large granite pavers will match the historic Belgian block pavers in terms of material, while complying with ADA accessibility requirements of a smooth surface, that the large size of the granite paver will help visually delineate the crosswalk area from the adjacent street bed, that the crosswalks mark a transition point from historic Belgian block paving to modern asphalt paving at the street bed, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Fulton Ferry Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Chair Carroll.
Yeah. Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that one's approved as well. And I just would ask that you think about some of the other comments that we made outside of these applications. Well, one is outside of the application is to think about street repairs in their entirety, and then also to think about the texture for safety on the paving. But these are approved as is, and we'll ask you to please work with the staff as you move forward. Thanks.
All right, we're going to move to item number 7. As I previously noted, item number 6 has been laid over 398 Pacific Street, which will be heard at a future public hearing day. So for item number 7, LPC 24-00446, this is an application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 444, lot 2, 343 Hoyt Street in the Carroll Gardens Historic District. This is a row house built in 1873, and the application is to replace a door, install ironwork, and construct rooftop and rear yard additions.
Afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Alexander Stoltz of SADA Architecture. This is Brady Nubile, my associate from SADA Architecture. Okay. Start the presentation with this is an image of this is a rendering of it, not the existing conditions, presenting the project. Here is a map of the historic district, a location of where we are located on the at the outskirts of it. On the right is not a tax lot photo, but it's the designation photo. No tax lot photo was available. This is a block plan with the blue indicating 1-story additions, green indicating 3-story, and yellow indicating 2-story, with the orange indicating rooftop additions. On the left is the historic district. We're on Hoyt Street, bordered by President to the north, Carroll Street to the south. Current condition of the building is in disrepair. There are some old violations on the building, which we're addressing in this application in our overall landmarks application.
And as you can see from the back, it's also overgrown. It's been in disrepair for quite some time. I'd also like to know, because it's also part of the application, the existing area of the stoop, which is a built up concrete block wall. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn around. This view is from the south on, sorry, from the south on Carroll Street, where you can see the outline of our visibility is right there. It's the second building in. The corner building is taller than our building, and it also is extended about 7 feet, I think, farther back. The bottom is an older view during the winter, where you can see the garage and you can see more visibility. This is outside of the historic district. The previous photo was actually within the historic district. The red building that my cursor is on is the border of the historic district. So we are at a more visible area, which is outside the historic district at this point. Our proposed building, our proposed project is to add vertical enlargement and also a rear enlargement. The vertical enlargement is shown on the right. The existing condition is on the left. And also, as part of the application, we are proposing to change the stoop into a more Italianate, more traditional historic old stoop. The lower right is a rendering of what our roof enlargement would look like, with a deck that would be lowered because we're going to be reframing the roof in this proposal. So the deck itself would be lowered. The whole addition would be as low. It would be quite a bit lower. The rendering on the right shows a new door. New doors approved at the staff level and the stoop. From the rear, as you saw from the existing conditions photo, on the left is on the left, and on the right, we would be adding 2 stories at the back and also a rooftop enlargement, as you can see, bracketed on the sides. Renderings on the left. Just to make a point that we're going to be converting this to all electric building. There will be no gas. We are also looking to make it a green building by adding planters on the rooftop. So it's going to be all HVAC system with planters. And the back materials will be red brick. We're going to match the existing brick as best we can. The upper enlargement would be a dark slate metal panel. The section of the existing section is above. The proposed section is below, where you can see the extent of what we are proposing with a new deck and stair at the back. Just to show you, this is a location plan of our photographs. So we were taking photographs from outside the historic district, which would be F, within the historic district, which would be E, and then we're taking photos all the way around through to President Street on the north. These are mock-up on the right. You cannot see it from the north as we're looking down the street from Hoyt Street. Again, the corner one is taller in case you need to locate. From the front, you can see the this photograph of the mock-up, and on the left is the rendering. If you're going from the south at Hoyt Street looking north, our building again is second from the corner, and this is with the mock-up in place. This is all the way down from the north looking south. Our building again is all the way in the distance. The corner one is the taller one. Now, Carroll Street is obviously the most visible from the south. So at Carroll Street, this is within the historic district. This is a rendering, our design rendering of what it would look like. And the next photo shows the mock-up where you can see the railing of the two-story and then the rooftop rear enlargement. This is within the historic district. The next photo is from outside the historic district, the rendering, and then the mock-up. This is from President Street, which is all the way on the other side. And in the distance is limited visibility of our mock-up. Our mock-up, photographs of the mock-up, you can see from on the right side is from the rear yard. And then from the roof level, you can see that we're doing I just want to make it clear that we are lowering the roof at the front. So this railing might look very low, but we're actually lowering it for visibility. So that railing will be 3'6" from the finished surface of the deck. And then the other part of our application to replace the stoop, we wanted to go with widening it in order to get full extruded stairs, or the stairs will extrude over the sides and have a metal railing on each side of the stoop. The example on the right, inspiration image, but the wall would not exist. The railing would go down to the treads. And we would also have a rounded, it is rounded now, we would keep it rounded at the bottom. Profiles of the stairs, traditional Italianate profiles. Floor plans, if you have any questions on that. Any questions on the floor plans you can ask. Just the violations that we have to resolve in order to get approval.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have any questions, commissioners? Commissioner Goldblum?
Sure, thanks. Just to be clear, there don't appear to be any rooftop additions on your side, on the part of the block that your building is in, that's in the district. Is that right?
Not on the part of the block that we're in. There are rooftop additions in the district.
In the district, but not on your block.
Not
that's
on
the block portion that's in.
Yeah, we're just the Hoyt Street side of the block. Yes.
Got it. And of the three buildings that appear to constitute a row, do you have any evidence that the railings in the front were at some point not what they are today?
In the front with the railings?
Yeah. You're proposing to take off the solid brownstone, presumably railings, and put on a metal railing that's an open picket. When I'm looking at the photo, I see three in a row of what look like similar railings. Tell me why your approach is appropriate from a historical perspective.
Down the block, there are certain examples. If you go down further north up,
right,
there are examples you can see in some of the tax lot photos. There are similar examples of railings that are similar that go all the way down.
Okay.
Did you say that your railings that were built up concrete?
Usually they built with concrete block or concrete.
So they're not the original brownstone railings?
I don't believe they are.
You know?
I don't.
Corey's going to answer a question.
Yeah, I mean, the staff did review tax photos for this building and others in the row. And this one did have a similar condition, I believe, that even during the time of the tax photo, but we still believe it to be a later alteration because others in the row had the earlier sort of open stoop with, heavier iron, decorative iron work on them, which we believe was a historic model here as well.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Quick question. Does the railings on the stoop need to extend past the stairs to meet building and accessibility code?
Well, this is a existing two-family going to one family. So accessibility is exempt in this.
But the building code may still require it. You should check.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. All right, we have Jeremy Woodop.
I'm Jeremy Woodruff, speaking for the Victorian Society, New York. The application for work at 343 Hoyt Street includes changes at the front, rear, and rooftop. The Victorian Society supports many of the changes at the front, including the removal of the modern ironwork at the areaway windows, the small aluminum awning over the basement level entrance, and the concrete areaway fence and stoop railings. However, we find that the proposed iron railings are overly simple. The Carroll Gardens designation report states that this house is one of a row of 4 houses, which are essentially similar in design to the houses in the row at 327 to 333 Hoyt Street, and that 327 and 333 retain their historic Italianate style ironwork. We recommend that the new ironwork at 343 be based on the historic ironwork at 327 and 333. A picture is provided in our written testimony. We also think the paired front doors, which appear in the designation photo, remain behind the modern gates. If they do, and they are historic as they appear to be, they should be retained and restored. We cannot comment upon the visibility of the rooftop addition as seen from Hoyt, as the boards which are supposed to show the mock-up in place are marked image forthcoming, and that was as of Thursday afternoon. The VSNY supports the proposed rear yard addition, which is not significantly visible over the adjacent garage building facing Carroll Street. But we find the rooftop addition clearly visible from Carroll to be unacceptable. Pushing the addition back 3 feet from the historic rear facade will reduce visibility significantly and respect the original volume of the building. We also find the proposed cladding for the addition to be inappropriate in terms of materiality and color. It has an industrial character, which is not in keeping with the domestic character of the house, and the dark color is too strong in contrast with the red brick. We recommend using a material similar in appearance to the soft gray turn-coated metal often used for roof bulkheads. Thank you, Commissioners.
Great, thank you very much. Madame Pastor.
Hi, Commissioners, thank you. I wanted to talk first about the 2-story extension, which also has a 3rd floor deck, which I'm not sure whether the Victorian gentleman saw or not saw. Once you see the mock-up with that deck, it is clearly visible from Carroll Street, depending on where you take the picture. So I think some of our neighbors here have supplied pictures taken from Carroll Street where you can clearly see that extension. Our feeling is that it really does disrupt the 100% uniform residential character of the row as viewed by Carroll Street. There are no 2-story extensions on Hoyt Street. There are on President Street, but when you stand on Carroll Street, you can see this beautiful, unmarred historic row with arched windows. Makes you feel like you're in the 1800s again. The other thing we want to say is that the penthouse addition is something that, again, no house on Hoyt Street has. Depending on where you take the picture, you can visibly see that penthouse from Hoyt Street clearly. So we are definitely not happy about that. We do feel that the historic fabric of our neighborhood is being threatened. And we also feel that if we approve this situation, it will just continue to go, and you won't be able to see what we tried to preserve, all of us lovingly on the block.
Okay, thank you. The next person who signed in is Rob. I can't read the last name, but it's okay. So just when you come up, state your name and before you speak.
My name is Robert Forty. I live at 341 next to the applicant. As far as the front goes, you can see from the fenestrations and all of the details that it was a distinct set of 3. The 2 with the wonderful iron are also distinctly different than these 3. They have different finishes over the door. They have different finishes around the windows. So you have a lovely set of 3, and then next to a lovely set of 2. And they look better as a set. So the fronts being the same looks better. Looks more historic, more pleasing. And I think the designation report indicated that it was a set of 3, not 4. Anyway, but it's easy to tell when you look at pictures. The rooftop mock-up can be seen from everywhere, can be seen from Hoyt, can be seen from the intersection of Hoyt and President, can be seen as you're walking down the beautiful President block to the anchor that is Hoyt. And it is totally out of character. Likewise, as you're walking up Carroll to Hoyt from Kiwanis, from Bond, the Carroll Street and President on the other side slope down sharply going to the Kiwanis Canal a block away. So as you come up, you look through our intact back facades with period windows and it's lovely. Your entrance to the historic district. The second story addition and the rooftop addition are jarringly visible from Carroll. There are no second story additions on this short 200-foot block of Hoyt. There are no rooftop additions on this block of Hoyt. There is nothing that extends into our small donut hole, which is chopped up maybe 60-70% by what were industrial buildings. There is nothing that projects anywhere near 13 feet 11 into the backyards. And all of this disrupts the light and air and the whole feel of the donut, which we changed radically.
Okay.
Sir, the 3 minutes are up. If you could please wrap up your testimony.
Okay. What do I got? 2D, second story, front roof. Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Chris McFoy.
Hello, good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Chris McFoy. I'm a neighbor on Carroll Street. I speak for myself and my wife. And we submit that the proposed bulk of the rooftop addition and the 2-story addition significantly mars the historic fabric of the Carroll Gardens district for the following reasons. First, the visibility from Hoyt and President. You'll notice that in the applicant's presentation, there are no photographs from President Street outside of the Hoyt Street zone. As I'm sure you know well, the Carroll Gardens Historic District is a very special place in the city. The fact that there's the deep setbacks on President with these beautiful gardens. And then because of that, the block is bigger than the 200 feet. So you get an offset of the east-west streets where both Carroll and President dead end into Hoyt. This creates a very unique condition of a green urban place fronted on 3 sides by completely intact brownstones. This is amazing. I am so privileged I get to experience this every day. It puts a special import on Hoyt Street because it is an elevation to a green urban space. And anything on Hoyt Street is visible not just from Hoyt, but very much so from President Street. So we would ask the commission to please consider the visibility, not just from Hoyt, but from President. And in my written testimony, I submitted many photographs taken from President, just in the district, but just outside of Hoyt Street. And the proposed rooftop addition gets more and more visible. There's a large tree there. When those leaves are gone, they'll even be more visible. So it's really damaging. There are no rooftop additions on that block, and this would set a terrible precedent. From Carroll, equally, we have a rare condition where the entire block is intact. There are only one-story additions on the whole block. So from both President and Hoyt, you can see this perfectly intact rear with beautiful arched windows. And the two-story addition blocks the entire view of that block from certain points on Carroll Street. It either blocks it partially or entirely. And this would be a real loss to a rare condition that's completely intact. So we asked the commission to just permit a one-story addition, just like all the other additions on the block. We were the architects 2 doors down. Landmarks required that we just do a one-story. It was approved at staff level and not extend beyond 11 feet, which we did. So we respect that. We're grateful for that. And we would appreciate Landmarks applying a similar conscientiousness to the rear yard for this project. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
All right. Hava Ortner.
Okay. I have a few photographs. Would it be okay to circulate them?
Yes.
Okay. So the first two photographs, the first one was taken last night and the second was taken this morning on Carroll Street in the historic landmark district, standing right on the sidewalk next to the garages that were referenced. So I just wanted everyone to take a look at that. They're plainly visible from the street. I think also the mock-up doesn't really show the modern door system that would also be visible as part of that, and the balcony. Those were the first photographs I wanted to show. And the second is of the rear of 343 Hoyt Street, taken just a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember the exact date, but the yard is no longer overgrown, so you can actually see the beautiful detail on the back of the facade. I just wanted to share with the commission that the community board meeting had high attendance from our neighbors because the district is only as good as every building within the district. Our house was also in disrepair when we purchased it. We're the 345 Hoyt Street, right next door. And we appreciate the landmark staff working with us to help figure out how to restore the building. We were required to use the original brick to rebuild the entire rear facade of the building. We restored the dentil molding at the top, which our neighbor shares. And there are a lot of components that we really took care to make sure that we're still restored when we did the work. We're still underway, so to be completed, but we really every step of the way have been trying to restore what is there. Similarly, in our most recent application to landmarks, we were told that we needed to do a brownstone curb when we replace our fence with a more historic fence, and it would meet up with the 343 fence. If the existing brownstone that you could see from the designation photos was clearly one of the 3 row houses that were identical, truthfully, it's going to look very bizarre if we follow what landmarks is asking that we do, and then the neighbor does a fence that doesn't relate to the neighboring properties. So, these are just all considerations that, I would ask that you consider. I think that's why the community board did listen to the neighbors and disapprove the proposal, because there really are a lot of beautiful features to 343 that I think we would all like to see retained. And we hope that landmarks will, continue to work with us to preserve the beauty of our district.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, is there anyone else in the room who wishes to speak on this item? All right, learning that there's no one else present who wishes to speak, I will turn it over to Gregory to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one attendee who signed up beforehand with their hand raised, that being Michelle Arbalou from the Historic Districts Council. So Michelle Arbalou, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC notes that the public was not given the opportunity to ascertain the visibility of this addition because the applicant submitted a proposal that is incomplete. Further, 2 of the 3 precedent images which the applicant included are from a non-designated properties outside of the Carroll Guard Historic District. Regarding the elements of the project that are included in the proposal, HGC believes that the front door should match the original, and the proposed stoop ironwork is not detailed sufficiently for us to evaluate its appropriateness. Finally, we find the proportion of the fenestration to masonry on the rear yard extension to be in need of reduction and refinement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 recommends denial, stating that the mock-up was more visible than shown in the presentation and that the applicant would not agree to return to their landmarks committee meeting. And we also received one additional letter recommending denial from an individual. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to address the comments we've heard.
I don't think we have any further comments. We understand the community board's objections. We definitely do. We're going to do a job on the front that is going to restore it back to its original grandeur. So is really our goal. So that's really what we're.
Okay, can you just go back to the front photographs? If you have some streetscape photos or something that shows beyond your building, that would be helpful. Okay, so there are 3 houses in this set, these solid cheek walls, and we think those are modern, later alterations, and that historically it probably had ironwork, and if not matching the 2 beyond, probably similar to that. And then the houses beyond that also have ironwork. But I was interested to hear that we worked with the neighbor at 345 on their ironwork, and I wondered if that's anything that we can look at now that would inform a relationship. Or so that's something maybe we can look at as we move forward. And does your areaway have a fence currently or a wall?
It's the same kind of fence as
It's a wall. And are all 3 of them walls, or? So I think we must have approved ironwork next door, so we can look at that a little bit more carefully. Okay. Any other final questions, commissioners? Okay, let's move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So we have 3 areas of work. At the front facade, the stoop reconstruction itself is actually eligible for a staff level approval, but in order to fully get approval from the staff, they would have to match what a typical historic ironwork, a typical historic detail for the ironwork. And so we are looking today at the ironwork that the design that they're proposing on the stoop and the areaway. We're also looking at the rooftop addition, which is visible from multiple points and also sits nearly on the rear wall. And finally, at a 2-story rear yard addition, which is also visible from Carroll Street, peeking over the fence. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Okay, so this is the second project today where we haven't seen elevations in the front of the back, which include the adjacent buildings. And it is harder to judge this. The photo on the front is pretty good, but there are cars there that block some of it, etc. So I would like to see that. I think the railing you show doesn't look very appropriate on that front stoop. I'm going to be curious what the other commissioners say. I think with the rooftop addition, it should be pulled back from the rear at least 3 feet and probably looking at a lighter gray color, more like a turn-coated copper or color. And I'll be interested what the other commissioners say. I'm torn about the two-story rear addition as to whether it should be one or if the two is all right. I would also add that the renderings, the brick doesn't look, it doesn't look that great, which doesn't help your case. And if it looked more like brick or so on some of these, it might make it look better. So I'm seeing what the other commissioners say, but I have some issues with this as proposed.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do want to note that the mock-up was recently reconstructed, and so there is more visibility over the front than we have in the presentation. And so in addition to your thoughts about setting it back at least 3 feet from the rear, I wonder if you want to add comments about the visibility over the front facade, which will circulate.
Here, press out with that.
Okay. I don't know. Do you have any further comments on that?
Yeah, it would be good to try and
Minimize.
it's good to also modify the front so it isn't visible at least head on.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I share similar concerns. I think the rooftop addition is clearly highly visible, and so I think that that is something that needs to be addressed, as well as I think the rear addition should be reduced as well. I like to hear what other commissioners have to say, but I think you should be reduced by 1 story.
Okay.
And obviously, yeah.
Thank you. And any thoughts on ironwork?
Yeah, the ironwork, I can see what is appropriate with the neighborhood, if it's consistent with the neighborhood, on what the rest of the commissioner feel.
Okay, Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, thank you. Well, what page is that? Could you go to page 4, please? That was it.
Block plan.
Block. So this, I'm sorry we don't have a photo of this. You know, it actually, I have to say, in general, I always feel like this is beyond this particular application. I always feel like we don't get enough photos of what the donut looks like. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it should be part of a standard checklist that we always get from applicants because it makes a difference. But even without that, I would say that this part of the donut looks relatively low. The light blue shows that most of these additions, except maybe one, are 1 story. So this part of Carroll Gardens is so nicely preserved. And I personally don't feel comfortable with any more than a 1-story addition. And when you look at the, what page is this on? Oh, by the way, I haven't seen what's going around, but I'm looking forward to it. When you look at the back view, what page is that? Could you move to that, please? That shows the visibility from the street. Yeah, oh, that's it. That was it. Yeah, I mean, that's even better. I feel completely uncomfortable with that.
Mhm.
So in a way, I feel like the addition on top of it is just at this particular moment, almost a non-starter because I guess I don't feel like this should be any more than one story. And then if that's where we are by some chance as a commission, then that sort of changes the project a little bit. So that's on the back. And then on the front, if we feel that these stoop stone railings are a later addition, I feel like what was submitted, the metal, is just too simplified. It has really no relationship to what's there in the neighborhood right now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master.
Yeah, this is a little bit tough. Starting with the front stoop. I guess the ironwork design is referring back to historical, so we're trying to return it to a historical state. However, the three linked row houses, the two right now they all share a wall. So you will be disrupting that unless the adjacent house is converting to ironwork as well. So I think that's just a really tough choice, whether you want to keep that symmetry as is or whether you want to refer back to the historical. So with the ironwork. So I will defer to the other commissioners on that. I think everyone's agreed that the rooftop addition as is too visible, as has been seen from multiple pictures. And, it seems like the community, the neighbors are also feel pretty strongly that it's too visible. The two-story rear yard addition, I know that we often do approve two-story rear additions, and I know that the depth seems to be appropriate. However, it is highly visible, and I don't believe that we have any two-story rear yard additions along this rear row. So I think it would be more appropriate for a one-story rear yard addition. Okay. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes. In this case, context is everything. I kind of like the door, but then I looked at the block and I couldn't find any door that looked like it. And they didn't give me a choice of what either to approve it or not.
The door is actually being done at staff level. So on the front, it's just the ironwork, the simple design of the ironwork.
Okay. The ironwork, obviously, the existing, the three buildings next to it have context. That's a no. Rooftop addition, way too large. Needs to be reduced quite a bit. I think I wrote here last night that it would have to be reduced substantially to be. And then the construction of the rear yard addition, only one story will do. 2 stories is way too much.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree that, this is a context where there are virtually all, for one-story additions. And the combination of that and the fact that it's very highly visible, I think really, they could make it a full width addition as some of the others are, as opposed to an L or something. But I think a 2-story addition in this particular location really does affect our view of that row. And also there are no rooftop additions. And if there's going to be a rooftop addition here, this one is really high, highly visible and is too big. I think I could permit a rooftop addition, even though there aren't any others, as long as it weren't so visible. And the railing, there's nothing horrible about it, but it probably could be improved by working with the staff to see what is a little more contextual.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gold.
I agree with what's been said before. I think that the context in this block dictates no rooftop addition at all and a one-story rear yard addition. I think that any modification of the cheek walls has to either conform with staff level work or not be done.
Okay. All right. So we're not going to take an action today. We've got very thoughtful comments from all of our commissioners. I think there's definitely an agreement on many of those. I think you can continue to work with the staff, both on the detailing of the ironwork, thinking about a one-story addition, and then in that context, is there a possibility for a much more substantially reduced, much less visible rooftop addition, if at all, in the context of a one-story rear addition? So I think we'll look at the whole package together, and we'll ask you to work with the staff, and we'll have you back when you're ready. All right, thank you. And so we're going to now break for lunch. It's 1:25. We'll return at 1:55 for the last two items of the day. Thank you all. And we'll ask all members of the public who are in this meeting to exit voluntarily so that you can rejoin without technical difficulties at 1:55 should you wish to return.